Chapter 2235. Looking at the second floor. An ancient stone staircase connected the hall to the second floor. There were also rooms on the second floor, a total of 7, and the doors were wide open. Outside the door, there was a long corridor. In other words, inside the castle, there was not only a hall, but also a total of 10 rooms. Actually, a long time ago, I guessed that there was more than one space in the castle. But I didn't expect the space to be so big. This is a complete palace. Qin Feiyang muttered. It's really unexpected. Fire Lotus whispered. Whoosh. White-eyed wolf turned into a stream of light, excitedly flew up to the second floor, and went into the 7 rooms. Qin Feiyang came back to his senses, and also walked into the other 2 rooms on the first floor. There was really nothing in the empty stone rooms. Fire Lotus had been following beside Qin Feiyang the whole time. Looking around the stone room, she asked curiously. Qin Dage, do these rooms and halls also have time arrays? Yes. The time array covers the entire castle. Qin Feiyang nodded. Covers the entire castle? Fire Lotus was stunned, and said. Then in that case, we don't have to squeeze in a room in the future. Yes. Each of us can have a room of our own here. To be exact, it's a cultivation room. Qin Feiyang smiled. The hall was a place for gatherings, and the 10 rooms were for closed-door cultivation. Fire Lotus said. Then I have to decorate this place well. Decorate? Qin Feiyang was stunned and said. Is that necessary? Of course. This will be our home in the future. Things like tables, chairs, and coffee tables are indispensable. Fire Lotus said. Home. Qin Feiyang muttered, turned around and walked out of the room, returned to the center of the hall, and looked around. This place was indeed like a home. But now it was a little cold. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, All right, you can decorate it well when you have time. Whoosh. White-eyed wolf flew down from the second floor and said with a pout, I thought there would be some treasure hidden here, but after searching all 7 rooms, there was nothing. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Indeed, it was easier to change mountains and rivers than to change one's nature. No matter where he went, the first thing he thought of was treasures. White-eyed wolf suddenly pointed to the area behind Qin Feiyang and Li Du, and said in surprise, Look, there's a door there. Qin Feiyang and Qin Haodong turned around to look. It was a very large stone door, which should be the entrance to the castle. The white-eyed wolf ran over, stretched out its claws and pushed hard. Immediately, its body stiffened. The stone door didn't even budge. Can't open it? The white-eyed wolf raised his eyebrows and exerted all his strength, but the stone door still did not budge. Little Qinzi, what's going on? White-eyed wolf turned to look at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said with a smile, This door can't be opened. As soon as he entered the hall, he had already noticed the entrance to the castle. If it could be opened, he would have already pushed it open to see what was outside. White-eyed wolf was stunned and asked suspiciously, Why can't it be opened? In fact, there are more than 3 layers of seals in this castle. Qin Feiyang said. What? White-eyed wolf was shocked. When the 3rd layer of seal was unlocked, a message came into my mind. If you want to open the door, you need to lift the seal on the castle by small beast. Qin Feiyang said. Damn small beast. White-eyed wolf's eyes suddenly turned cold. If small beast had not sealed the castle and taken away Chang Shui, they would not have been so passive all these years. Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. Then do you know what's outside the door? I don't know. Qin Feiyang shook his head. In fact, he also wanted to open the door and go out to take a look. But when he thought of small beast's seal, a sense of powerlessness rose in his heart. Then let's go out and eat dragon meat. Qin Feiyang had eaten dragon meat and broken through to the monarch god level. White-eyed wolf certainly would not miss such a great benefit. You can go out. I'll go and take a look at the pill scripture. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. What about you? White-eyed wolf looked at Fire Lotus. I'm not interested in dragon meat. I'll stay here and decorate the castle. Fire Lotus said. You're not interested in dragon meat? White-eyed wolf looked at Fire Lotus in astonishment. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but be stunned. Can't I be a vegetarian? Fire Lotus said helplessly. Fine, fine, fine. Up to you. Little Qinzi, send Big Brother out. White-Eyed Wolf said. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and White-Eyed Wolf immediately disappeared from the hall. Then he looked at Fire Lotus. What's wrong? Fire Lotus was suspicious. I'm very puzzled. The essence contained in dragon meat is enough for you to break through to the next level. Why aren't you tempted? Qin Feiyang said. Fire Lotus's eyes flickered. Okay, don't say it if you don't want to. I won't force you. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and turned to walk into the first cultivation room. Thank you. Looking at Qin Feiyang's back, Fire Lotus murmured. Then she scanned the ancient castle, thinking about how to decorate it. In the cultivation room, Qin Feiyang stood in front of the altar, opened the iron box, and flipped open the pill scripture. The 3 pill recipes were presented to Qin Nan. They were Nirvana pill, Mixed Essence pill, and Eternal Youth pill. Nirvana pill was the door to unlock the potential of the Monarch God realm. Mixed Essence pill was the pill that allowed the Monarch God to break through to the next level. However, when Qin Feiyang checked the formula of the Eternal Youth pill, he was slightly stunned. This Eternal Youth pill was used to extend one's life. It had the same effect as the Life Extension pill. But there was a difference. The Eternal Youth pill could extend one's life by at least 10,000 years. 1 pill pattern could extend one's life by 10,000 years, 2 pill patterns could extend one's life by 20,000 years, and so on. If it was a divine pill, it could extend one's life by 100,000 years. 100,000 years? What kind of concept was that? Qin Feiyang didn't even dare to think about it. But this wasn't the main point. The main point was that even if one had taken the Life Extension pill before, taking the Eternal Youth pill now would still be useful. In other words, these 2 pills would not be affected by each other at all. However, there was one point that was the same as the Life Extension pill. No matter who it was, they could only take 1 Eternal Youth pill in their lifetime. At least 10,000 years. This pill is a bit heaven-defying. Qin Feiyang muttered. Then he looked at the herbs needed for the 3 pills. Hui, where's Qin Feiyang? But at this moment, a pleasant voice came into the castle. Shengguan Fenglan? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He closed the pill scripture and left the castle. He saw Shengguan Fenglan standing in the sky, looking at Hui suspiciously. After Qin Feiyang appeared, Shengguan Fenglan's gaze immediately fell on Qin Feiyang. Lanner, why are you here? Hui didn't expect Shengguan Fenglan to come. He was stunned at first, then put down the wine jar, and ran to Shengguan Fenglan. Shengguan Fenglan said unhappily, This is not your private territory. Are you the only ones allowed to come? No. I'm happy. Hui waved his hand. Shengguan Fenglan shook her head and smiled. She landed next to the bonfire and looked at the dragon meat in the big iron pot. Then she looked at the white-eyed wolf who was wolfing it down. Her eyes suddenly showed a trace of surprise. Long time no see. The white-eyed wolf grinned. Shengguan Fenglan was stunned and asked suspiciously, Have we met before? The white-eyed wolf laughed and said, You haven't met me, but I know you. Brother? The corner of Shengguan Fenglan's mouth twitched. She looked at Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, Where did this wolf cub come from? It's my partner. It's just that it has been cultivating in seclusion and hasn't shown itself, so no one knows of its existence. As for the way it speaks, you'll get used to it. Qin Feiyang smiled. The white-eyed wolf looked up at Qin Feiyang in confusion and asked, Is there something wrong with the way I speak? Eat your food and don't interrupt. Qin Feiyang glared at it, then looked at Shengguan Fenglan and said, Temple Master, did you come here specifically to find us? I came here yesterday, but I didn't see you. Now I'm just here to try my luck. I didn't expect to really meet you, and you're drinking and eating meat so leisurely. Aren't you nervous at all? Where did you go yesterday? Shengguan Fenglan threw out 2 questions in a row. Hui laughed and said, We've already made full preparations. Why should we be nervous? Qin Feiyang also showed a smile on his face. Full preparations? Shengguan Fenglan looked at the 2 in a daze. In the face of powerful dragons, even 9th Heaven Palace and Treasure Pavilion, did not dare to say such conceited words. She asked curiously, "What preparations?" "A secret." Hua Yi smiled mysteriously. Shangguan Fenglan rolled her eyes and said, "Did you really break into the divine land?" "Not really. It's the fire dragon that was guarding the entrance. Now the stew in this pot is its meat," Qin Feiyang said. "That's not enough?" Shangguan Fenglan was speechless and asked again, "Then is there really an ancestral dragon coming to our northern region?" "Yes. We've seen this ancestral dragon and fought with it. It's the ancestral dragon of the Fire Dragon clan, and it's extremely powerful." Qin Feiyang nodded. "There really is one." Shangguan Fenglan's heart sank. She really hoped that those people from the Dragon clan were just scaring everyone. Because whether it was Ninth Heaven Palace or Treasure Pavilion, they did not have the courage to face the ancestral dragon of the dragons. But this expectation was disappointed. Could the northern region survive the ancestral dragon's arrival safely? Hua Yi comforted her. "Don't worry, we'll deal with the ancestral dragon." "You." Shangguan Fenglan looked at the two and shook her head. "Even if you have the ability, do you know that once the ancestral dragon dies in our northern region, the dragons will be furious? At that time, maybe the dragons will come out in full force. And it might even alarm the revered dragon to come to our northern region personally. We've thought about it. This is what we did, and it has nothing to do with you. Even if the revered dragon comes, he'll at most ask some questions. Moreover, we'll try our best to draw the dragon's attention to us," Hua Yi said. "I hope so." Shangguan Fenglan sighed and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. "I came to you because I have a piece of good news to tell you." "Good news?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and said with a wry smile. "What good news can there be in this situation? The Great Elder has abandoned the past and no longer hates you and your ancestor. And this morning, he personally went to the reclining treasure pavilion and apologized to the deputy pavilion master in person, and gave the deputy pavilion master the antidote for the bone-corroding spirit thread." "Isn't that good news?" Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyang was stunned and hurriedly asked, "Really?" Shangguan Fenglan nodded. "Then this is really good news," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. He really did not expect that this stubborn old man would think things through. It seemed that his efforts were not in vain. Chapter 2236. Now you don't have to worry about the Great Elder plotting against you. You can focus on dealing with the dragons. Shangguan Fenglan smiled. "Yes. But the arrest warrant can't be revoked. After all, there is more than one dragon ancestor. Once the arrest warrant is revoked, Empyrean Palace will definitely be suspected by the dragons. In short, not only can they not revoke the arrest warrant, but they will also continue to pursue us," Qin Feiyang said. "I know." Shangguan Fenglan nodded. Hua Yi suddenly said, "I'm afraid it will be a little difficult to eliminate the dragon's suspicion of Empyrean Palace and the Treasure Pavilion." "What do you mean?" Shangguan Fenglan was suspicious. Hua Yi said, "Haven't you heard about your sister's situation?" "My sister?" Shangguan Fenglan was stunned for a moment before she suddenly thought of something. She frowned and said, "Are you talking about her confession to Qin Feiyang in Sky Dragon City yesterday?" "Yes." Hua Yi nodded and said worriedly, "When she confessed, many people saw it. Once the dragons arrive and ask around, they will know about her relationship with Qin Feiyang." Shangguan Fenglan's heart sank. She said angrily, "That damn girl is too willful." Hua Yi said again, "At that time, it might even implicate you. After all, you are sisters. It seems that we have to think of a way to solve this matter." Shangguan Fenglan's gaze was heavy. "How? Kill them? There are so many people. Can you kill them all? If we don't kill them all, then this matter will definitely not be able to be hidden. After all, not everyone will choose to keep this secret for us. Actually, this matter is also Qin Feiyang's fault." Hua Yi said. "Blame me?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Hua Yi said, "If you had fallen out with Shangguan Qiu at that time, there would be evidence left behind. Weren't you there at that time?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. Hua Yi said, "She confessed to you. What does it have to do with me?" Fine. It's all my fault." Qin Feiyang nodded helplessly. Shangguan Fenglan's eyes flashed. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "How about this?" Qin Feiyang looked at Shangguan Fenglan suspiciously. Shangguan Fenglan said, "You'll have to suffer a little and be a bad person again." "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "You pretended to hurt her and humiliated her in public. My sister is a very prideful person. If you do that, she will definitely hate you." Shangguan Fenglan said. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he even had the urge to curse. Why did he come up with such a rotten idea? If he really did that, not only would Shangguan Qiu be hurt, but he would also be criticized for being heartless. Hui thought about it seriously and nodded. At present, this is the fastest and most effective idea. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. He said, "If you want to go, you can go. I don't want to be the bad guy. I have nothing to do with Shangguan Qiu. What's the use of going? As for honor, don't even mention it. As Shangguan Qiu's sister, if she comes forward, it will be like a parent disciplining a child. It will make Shangguan Qiu more rebellious. Don't be so wishy-washy. As a man, you should be responsible," Hui said disdainfully. Qin Feiyang said angrily, "When the time comes, I will be the one who will be criticized, not you. Of course you can talk nonsense like this." Hui said, "As long as we can eliminate the dragon's suspicion of Shangguan Qiu, what's the big deal about being criticized?" Qin Feiyang was so angry that he gritted his teeth. This bastard was a classic example of someone who didn't know how to speak. As a man, you have to be responsible and aware. You can't implicate a weak woman just because of your reputation, especially a woman who likes you so much. Hui sighed. "Can you not be so sarcastic?" Qin Feiyang glared at Hui angrily, then looked at Shangguan Fenglan and frowned. "Do you really want to do this?" "Yes." "Cut the Gordian knot," Shangguan Fenglan said. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "But I have a small request." As his sister, she had no objections. What was he afraid of? Shangguan Fenglan raised her eyebrows and said, "This is all because of you. You have a request?" "What do you mean it's all because of me? Did I force your sister to confess to me in public?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. Shangguan Fenglan was also angry and shouted, "If she didn't like you, would she have taken the initiative to confess to you?" "It's my fault." Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. Once a woman was unreasonable, there was really no way to deal with her. "Not your fault, but mine?" Shangguan Fenglan glared at him. "Oh, okay. It's my fault, it's my fault. Just take it that I said something wrong. It's not a request. I'm asking you to do me a favor," Qin Feiyang said helplessly. "That's more like it." Shangguan Fenglan glared at him and said, "Tell me, what do you want me to help you with?" Qin Feiyang said, "Help me beat up a few people." "Looking for someone?" Shangguan Fenglan was taken aback and asked suspiciously, "Who?" Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and divine power surged. The phantoms of 2 people and 1 beast quickly appeared in the void. That's right. It was Lin Yi, Tan Wu, and the infernal divine hound. Shangguan Fenglan looked at the 2 people and 1 beast and asked, "Who are they to you? Are they in the north region?" Qin Feiyang said, "They are in the north region, and they are considered to have a good relationship with me." "Okay. As long as they are in the north region, then I am sure I can find them," Shangguan Fenglan said. Hui leaned forward and whispered, "Lan, you can't be too sure. If they change their appearance, where will you find them?" "It's okay. Anyway, I will continue to arrest you. Just now, I can use this arrest warrant to conduct a comprehensive search of the cities in the entire north region," Shangguan Fenglan said. "In other words, on the surface, you are searching for us, but in fact, you are helping Qin Feiyang find people?" Hui asked. "Yes." Shangguan Fenglan nodded. "My Lan'er is really smart." Hui chuckled. Qin Feiyang said disdainfully, "Did others agree to it? And your Lan, don't you have any shame?" "I like it. Why do you care? I think you're just jealous and hateful," Hui said proudly. "Jealous of you? You are thinking too much," Qin Feiyang sneered. Shangguan Fenglan looked at the 2 speechlessly and said indifferently, "I will go back first. You can make the arrangements." After saying that, without waiting for the two to respond, she turned around and flew away. Wait. Qin Feiyang seemed to suddenly think of something and hurriedly called out. Shengguan Fenglan stopped and looked back at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, "There are a few more people. You have to help me keep an eye out." "There are more?" Shengguan Fenglan was stunned. Qin Feiyang nodded and condensed the demon ancestor, Dong Zhengyang, and the demon dragon's phantoms. He said, "The three of them may not be in the north region, but I still want to confirm it." Shengguan Fenglan looked carefully for a while. After memorizing the appearance of the demon ancestor and Dong Zhengyang, she nodded and turned to leave. "Wait a little longer." Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said. Shengguan Fenglan was stunned and immediately said angrily, "Can you say it all at once?" Sorry. This is the last time." Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly and condensed the phantoms of a man and a beast. That person was a middle-aged man. He was more than 9 meters tall and wore a snow-white robe that was spotless. His long hair draped over his shoulders and his facial features were well defined. His eyes were especially special, as if they were condensed from black ice. They were crystal clear and flickered with strands of divine light. And that beast looked like a musk deer, but it had a head like a dragon's head and a huge tail like an ox's tail. Its body was also densely covered with scales. They looked like snake scales, but more like dragon scales. Moreover, on its head there were 2 antlers. Its entire body was red and blooming with a bright light. "This is Fire Qilin." Huai looked at the beast and exclaimed. Shengguan Fenglan was also extremely surprised. "That's right. It's a Fire Qilin. And this man is also very important to me. But I can't be sure if they are in the north region. So I'll have to trouble Palace Master to help me find them," Qin Feiyang said. "I'll try my best." After Shengguan Fenglan finished speaking, she turned around and quickly left. Huai curiously looked at the middle-aged man's shadow and said, "Who is he? Why is he so important to you?" "The person who once saved my life," Qin Feiyang said. This middle-aged man was the divine beast uncle who occupied the endless sea. He had a deep impression of this person, not only because he had saved his life, but also because of the seal in this person's body. Back then, this person stirred up trouble and was finally suppressed by the ancestor and placed a seal in his body. If this seal was not lifted, his cultivation would forever remain at the false god realm. And last time, leaving the miracle. According to Tantai Li, this divine beast uncle wanted to enter the 3rd floor to find the ancestor in order to unlock the seal in his body. As for the Fire Qilin, according to Tan Wu and the Hell God Hound, he also left alone. Back then, since the ancestor could come to the ancient world from the 3rd floor, then there was probably an entrance to the ancient world on the 3rd floor. So he suspected. The Fire Qilin and the divine beast uncle were either on the 3rd floor or in the ancient world. Huai asked suspiciously, "How many of you have entered our ancient world?" Qin Feiyang said, "Just these." Huai teased, "It seems that our ancient world is still very popular. The ancient world is strong because of its soul stones and divine crystals. Otherwise, it would be no different from other continents." Qin Feiyang said lightly. Huai said, "Look at your disdainful face, then why did you come here? If it weren't to find the ancestor, the inner demons and big cousin, would I come here?" Qin Feiyang pursed his lips. "What? You actually have the inner demons?" Huai was surprised. "Don't mention it." Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. He turned his head to look at the white-eyed wolf who was still wolfing down the food, and a smile appeared on his face. Although the inner demons were gone, at least there was still the white-eyed wolf, old Zhao, and the others to fight with him. He was not alone. It was just that the regret in his heart could not dissipate. Of course, there was also hatred for Ice Dragon. Although he was able to live back then because of the divine pill that Ice Dragon gave him, this blood debt could not be offset. Chapter 2237. The night passed. The next morning, dark clouds covered the sky and it started to rain heavily. Why is it still raining? Is it because some bastard is going to do something wicked today? Even the heavens can't stand it, so they're going to strike this bastard with lightning? Huai looked at the sky and said suspiciously. Qin Feiyang's face twitched and he said angrily, "Do you know? I really want to strangle you." "Hey." Huai grinned and said, "Do you want me to go and help you?" "It's best if you go for me," Qin Feiyang said. Huai laughed and said, "Then forget it, lest Lanner misunderstands." Qin Feiyang glared at him fiercely and activated a teleportation altar. Huai grinned and said, "Be careful, maybe the heavens will really strike you with lightning." "Damn you." Qin Feiyang suddenly roared and kicked at Huai. "Hey." Huai flashed and instantly appeared a few miles away, his eyes full of mockery. "I'll deal with you when I come back." Qin Feiyang snorted coldly and leaped onto the altar. The purpose of this trip was naturally to go to the treasure pavilion and find Shangguanqiu. As for White-Eyed Wolf, he had already returned to the castle to cultivate in seclusion before dawn. After all, the castle's time rule was that one day was equivalent to 10 years. He couldn't waste it. And his cultivation had also stepped into the initial stage of the monarch god. The treasure pavilion. It was already bustling early in the morning. There were countless people going in and out. Whoosh. When Qin Feiyang arrived at the gate of the treasure pavilion, the two guards at the gate immediately became alert. The people going in and out also hurriedly retreated to the side, their eyes full of surprise. Why did this person come to the treasure pavilion so early in the morning? Wait a minute. Was he going to destroy the treasure pavilion again? When the treasure pavilion was destroyed, it had been rebuilt the next day. After all, the treasure pavilion's daily turnover was extremely large. If it was closed for a day, it would lose a lot of money. So the building in front of him was brand new. Qin Feiyang, I'm telling you, don't mess around. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. The two guards stared at Qin Feiyang vigilantly. Am I the kind of person who would mess around? Qin Feiyang smiled. Yes. The two nodded seriously. Qin Feiyang had no choice but to walk towards the door. You can't go in. The two guards hurriedly stopped Qin Feiyang. Why? Qin Feiyang frowned. You're still a wanted person, so you can't enter the treasure pavilion. If it wasn't for the steward's order, we would have already captured you the moment you appeared. Let's go. The enforcers of the Nine Heavens Palace are looking for you everywhere. When they receive the news, you won't be able to escape. The two guards said. Qin Feiyang sneered. What if I insist on going in? Then we can only offend you. The two guards said in a deep voice as an aura spread out. Stop. But at this moment, a shout was heard. A woman in a long white dress quickly walked out of the treasure pavilion. Greetings, steward. The two guards hurriedly bowed to salute. Shangguanqiu nodded and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. You're here. Qin Feiyang nodded. Shangguanqiu said. Then follow me in. Steward, you can't. The two guards' faces changed as they hurriedly stopped Shangguanqiu. What? Shangguanqiu raised his eyebrows. Steward, pavilion masters, he hasn't been revoked yet. How can you let him in? We can understand how you feel, but you have to consider the big picture. If you let him in now, how will people talk about the treasure pavilion behind our backs? The two guards said anxiously. You're right. Steward Shangguan, you can't ruin the reputation of the treasure pavilion because of personal affairs. The surrounding crowd also tried to persuade him. Shangguanqiu's face was a little pale. Qin Feiyang kept looking at Shangguanqiu without saying a word. His eyes were extremely complicated. It was obvious that Shangguanqiu had really fallen for him. This made him a little hesitant. Should he really hurt this woman? Although it was just a show, Shangguanqiu didn't know. She would definitely take it seriously. How sad would she be then? He really couldn't bear to hurt a woman who liked him like this. Qin Feiyang, if you don't want to implicate her, you'd better be quick. Suddenly, Shangguan Fenglan's voice rang in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang glanced at the surrounding crowd. But he didn't see Shangguan Fenglan. She should be hiding in the space divine item to supervise him. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed secretly and muttered. Don't blame me. I'm doing this for your own good. Then, his face turned cold as he looked at Shangguanqiu and said, Did I ask you to meddle in my business? Shangguanqiu was stunned. She turned to look at Qin Feiyang. The surrounding crowd was also shocked. Sheng Guanqiu had helped him so much. How could he speak to her in such an indifferent tone? Don't flatter yourself. I don't need you to meddle in my business. Also, I'll never fall for a shameless woman like you. So please don't bother me again. Qin Feiyang said expressionlessly. Sheng Guanqiu's delicate body trembled slightly when she heard this. Tears suddenly welled up in her eyes. Qin Feiyang, don't go too far. Sheng Guanqiu is capable and beautiful. How is she not good enough for you? Who do you think you are? She likes you because your ancestors have accumulated good karma. Don't take it for granted. Do you understand? The crowd suddenly roared with righteous indignation. Qin Feiyang lifted the corner of his mouth and said disdainfully, You think too highly of her. If she didn't have a powerful master and sister, she wouldn't have been able to become the manager of the treasure hall. After all, it's only because of her connections. Qin Feiyang, don't go too far. I have achieved what I have today all because of my own ability. Sheng Guanqiu shouted. You? Don't say that I look down on you. If you left your master and sister, who would listen to you? You obviously relied on your connections. Why don't you admit it? It seems that not only do you not know how to be humiliated, you're also a hypocritical woman. Qin Feiyang sneered. You. Sheng Guanqiu stared at Qin Feiyang angrily. Her tears flowed like a spring. Bastard. The manager has been taking good care of you. How dare you humiliate her in public? I won't forgive you. The two guards roared angrily. Their auras exploded and they pounced on Qin Feiyang. You too? Qin Feiyang sneered. A wisp of blood appeared and pierced through their ocean of qi at lightning speed. Ah! The two guards screamed in pain. They covered their lower abdomens and stared at Qin Feiyang with anger in their eyes. Qin Feiyang looked at them sarcastically. He sneered at Qin Feiyang and said, See? This is my strength. What are you? Do you think I'll like you? Sheng Guanqiu closed her eyes in pain. You should know your place. It's not that I'm not good enough for you. It's that you're not good enough for me. I'll say it again. Don't bother me again. Otherwise, not only will I kill you, but I'll also destroy all the treasure pavilions in the northern region. Qin Feiyang sneered. He turned around and flew into the air. Qin Feiyang. How dare you humiliate my sister in public? You're courting death. Where are the enforcers? Take him down. At this moment, Sheng Guanfenglan, who had been hiding in the dark, finally showed up. She stared at Qin Feiyang and shouted angrily. As soon as she finished speaking, a large group of enforcers came from afar. The leader was really Wang Yin. Every one of them looked ferocious. Damn it! Are you serious? Qin Feiyang's face changed and he said angrily in secret. If I'm not serious, how can I make people believe me? You'd better run for your life. Sheng Guanfenglan laughed secretly. Then she ran to Sheng Guanqiu and said with concern, Sister, are you okay? Don't worry. I'll help you vent your anger. What a headache. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. He immediately used the attainment formula and fled out of the city. Wang Yin led a group of enforcers and chased after him aggressively. Serves him right. Why didn't I see that he was such a jerk before? We must catch him and vent our anger for Sheng Guanqiu. The surrounding crowd also flew into the air angrily and chased after Qin Feiyang. This had really incurred the wrath of the crowd. Boom. With the arrival of a terrifying aura, an old man with white hair appeared in the sky above the treasure pavilion. It was the Deputy Pavilion Master. Deputy Pavilion Master, quickly take down Qin Feiyang. He humiliated the steward in public and wanted to kill us. The two guards whose qi Cs were destroyed immediately shouted angrily. What? This is outrageous. Hearing this, the Deputy Pavilion Master emitted a monstrous killing intent. He looked up at Qin Feiyang's back and disappeared in an instant. Boy, you're on your own now, Sheng Guanfenglan murmured. Then she supported Sheng Guanqiu and walked into the treasure pavilion. Outside the city, Qin Feiyang fled into the mountains without looking back. He was not afraid of Wang Yin and her group of enforcers. Under Sheng Guanfenglan's deliberate arrangement, the most powerful enforcers were perfect Sir Gods. A mere perfect Sir God could not stop him now. However, the arrival of the Deputy Pavilion Master caught him off guard. This old man was one of the most powerful people in the North region. Although he was usually very kind, once he was angry, no one could stop him. Just like when he blocked Ninth Heaven Palace. Anyway, the deputy pavilion master was someone who could never be angered. Very soon, Wang Yun and her group were shaken off by Qin Feiyang. However, the deputy pavilion master's aura was getting closer and closer. How did Shengguan Fenglan do things? Didn't she know to inform the deputy pavilion master of such an important matter in advance? Boy, stop running. Another moment passed. The deputy pavilion master's voice suddenly rang in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang was stunned and turned to look at the deputy pavilion master. What did this mean? Could it be that he had wronged Shengguan Fenglan, and that Shengguan Fenglan had actually told the deputy pavilion master? He stopped in his tracks suspiciously. Swoosh! The deputy pavilion master teleported and landed in front of Qin Feiyang. Looking at the panting Qin Feiyang, he said speechlessly, "If I wanted to kill you, do you think you could escape from Sky Dragon City with your speed?" Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly. "Last night, Shengguan Fenglan sent me a message and told me about your plan. I showed up just to cooperate with you." The deputy pavilion master smiled. Immortal God of War. Chapter 2238. I see. I really thought that you were here to hunt me down. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. To be honest, he was really scared. The deputy pavilion master shook his head and smiled. "Thank you for always thinking of our treasure pavilion and Nine Heavens Palace." Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand and said, "You're too polite, this is what I should do." "What you should do?" The deputy pavilion master murmured and sighed. "In this world, I'm afraid only you would think this way. If it were anyone else, who would dare to care about the life and death of our treasure pavilion and Nine Heavens Palace? Not to mention the living beings of the entire North region." Qin Feiyang scratched his head and laughed. "Now that you've said it, it makes me feel a little embarrassed." The deputy pavilion master shook his head and smiled. "You really don't have any feelings for little Chiu?" Qin Feiyang's expression froze. He said helplessly, "Senior, can we not talk about this topic?" "All right. It seems that you two are really not fated to be together." The deputy pavilion master sighed. "Feelings can't be forced. In the end, both parties will suffer. I also sincerely hope that Shengguan Qiu can find a man that she can entrust her life to." Qin Feiyang said. The deputy pavilion master said, "Then let time erase all of this." Qin Feiyang nodded. As time passed, Shengguan Qiu would naturally forget about him. "Right, I'll return this to you." Qin Feiyang took out the map of the Sky Dragon Sea and handed it to the deputy pavilion master. The deputy pavilion master was stunned and smiled. "If you didn't take the initiative to take it out, I would have forgotten about this thing." After saying that, he took the map and kept it. Qin Feiyang suddenly noticed that the deputy pavilion master was still holding a walking stick in his hand. He was slightly stunned and asked suspiciously, "Didn't the Grand Elder already give you the antidote? Why are you still holding a walking stick?" The deputy pavilion master looked at the walking stick in his hand and said, "I've used it for so many years, I've long gotten used to it. Besides, I'm old, it's normal to hold a walking stick." "All right." Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly. Boom. At this moment, terrifying auras rolled in from afar. Qin Feiyang raised his head and saw a group of people streaking across the sky like lightning, heading towards them. The ones in the lead were precisely Wang Yun and a group of law enforcers. Behind them was a huge crowd. There were a few thousand of them. They were all here to fight for justice for Shengguan Qiu. Although this old man knows that this is your plan, the others don't. You've already angered the people. Be careful in the future. The vice pavilion master chuckled. Qin Feiyang frowned. "Why do I feel like you're taking pleasure in my misfortune? Shouldn't I? When you and Hui destroyed my treasure pavilion in front of everyone, you caused my treasure pavilion to lose all face," the vice pavilion master said. "Isn't this because of the situation?" Qin Feiyang felt wronged. "But it's an indisputable fact that you destroyed my treasure pavilion. All right. Since we're putting on a show, we have to go all out. Are you ready?" the vice pavilion master said. "Ready for what?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The Vice Pavilion Master did not answer, but a playful smile crept onto his face. Seeing that smile, Qin Feiyang had an ominous feeling in his heart. Immediately after, before he could react, the Vice Pavilion Master slapped him on the chest. Old bastard. Qin Feiyang suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, accompanied by a roar, and smashed into the mountains below like a meteorite. Several mountains were razed to the ground on the spot. How dare you scold me? The Vice Pavilion Master raised his eyebrows. But just as he was about to strike again, his expression was slightly stunned. Immediately after, he hurriedly waved his hand, and a drop of bright red blood rose into the air and floated in front of him. This was the blood that Qin Feiyang spat out before. Shouldn't it be purple gold dragon blood? But why is it ordinary blood? The Vice Pavilion Master was dumbfounded. Not only was it the same as ordinary blood, but there was not even a trace of dragon power. What was going on? Lord Vice Pavilion Master, where is Qin Feiyang? A group of people flew over and surrounded the Vice Pavilion Master, asking angrily. Below. The Vice Pavilion Master pointed to the ground below, but his eyes were fixed on the drop of blood. Quickly go down and drag him out. Everyone immediately rushed down. Wang Yun looked at the ground below, then looked at the blood in front of the Vice Pavilion Master, and asked suspiciously, Lord Vice Pavilion Master, why are you staring at this blood? The Vice Pavilion Master came back to his senses, turned to look at Wang Yun, and asked, You seem to be called Wang Yun, right? Yes. Wang Yun hurriedly nodded. The Vice Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion actually knew her name. She was really flattered. I've heard from Shengguan Fenglan that you're ambitious and responsible. You're quite capable. The Vice Pavilion Master laughed. No. It's all because of the Palace Master's leadership. Wang Yun hurriedly waved her hand. The Vice Pavilion Master said, Shengguan Fenglan can be considered to be your confidant. You should know a lot of things, right? This. Wang Yun could not help but be vigilant. Was he asking about the Palace Master's privacy? Don't misunderstand. I just want to ask you, is Qin Feiyang's bloodline power purple gold dragon blood? The Vice Pavilion Master said. So that's it. Wang Yun heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. I heard from the Palace Master that it's purple gold dragon blood. Are you sure? The Vice Pavilion Master asked. Yes. When he was dealing with Yin Hui, the Palace Master saw it with his own eyes. It's definitely not fake. Wang Yun said. Since it's purple gold dragon blood, then why is his blood the same as ours now? The Vice Pavilion Master looked at the blood floating in the void again. Same. Wang Yun was stunned, and immediately looked at the drop of blood, and said in surprise, Could this be? That's right. This is Qin Feiyang's blood. The Vice Pavilion Master nodded. That's impossible. What the Palace Master saw back then was purple gold dragon blood. I heard that Yin Hui and Elder Yin also know about it. Wang Yun said. This is really strange. It's impossible for the bloodline power to change. Could it be that the Qin Feiyang we see now is not the real Qin Feiyang? The Vice Pavilion Master was surprised. Not the real Qin Feiyang? Lord, do you mean that he's being impersonated? Wang Yun said. The Vice Pavilion Master trembled and looked down. Vice Pavilion Master, he's gone. We've searched the surroundings, but we can't find Qin Feiyang. The people below looked up at the Vice Pavilion Master and said, He's gone? The Vice Pavilion Master was stunned, and he immediately released his divine sense and looked down. As expected, he didn't find Qin Feiyang. This isn't a small matter. If someone is really impersonating Qin Feiyang, then they might be plotting something. Vice Pavilion Master, I have to report this matter to the Palace Master immediately, so I'll take my leave first. Wang Yun bowed. All right. The Vice Pavilion Master nodded. Enforcers of Nine Heaven Palace, come back with me. Wang Yun shouted coldly and flew back to Sky Dragon City like lightning. Why are you in such a hurry? Could it be that something big has happened? The rest of the enforcers looked at each other, and with a belly full of doubts, they hurriedly followed. The Vice Pavilion Master raised his eyebrows, and with a flash disappeared without a trace. What's going on? We haven't found him yet. Why did they all leave? What should we do? Continue to search, this arrogant and condescending scum. We must find him. The anger in everyone's heart couldn't be extinguished. Back to Qin Feiyang. At this moment, he had already fled to the seaside of Sky Dragon Sea and met up with Hua Yi. Why are you in such a sorry state? Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyang, who was dripping with blood, in astonishment. It's all because of your rotten idea. If I didn't have the concealment art, and the divine moonjade pendant, I would have been cut into pieces by now. Qin Feiyang glared at Hua Yi snappily, and then lowered his head to look at his mangled chest, feeling extremely annoyed in his heart. This vice pavilion master was really ruthless. He had almost taken his life. Haha. Hua Yi couldn't help but laugh and asked, does that mean our plan was very successful? Qin Feiyang couldn't be bothered with him, took out a life pill, and threw it into his mouth. Buzz. At this time, the image crystal moved. Qin Feiyang was startled, took out the image crystal, and a shadow quickly appeared. It was the Vice Pavilion Master. The Vice Pavilion Master stood on top of a mountain peak, with a faint smile on his old face and teased. Quite nimble, escaping in the blink of an eye. Qin Feiyang was speechless. If I wasn't nimble, I would have lost my life. The Vice Pavilion Master frowned and said, so that person just now was really you? If it wasn't me, then who was it? Look, the wound is still there. Qin Feiyang said in annoyance. The Vice Pavilion Master looked at the wound on Qin Feiyang's chest, and frowned. Then your bloodline power. How can it be ordinary blood? And Qin Feiyang was stunned, looked down at the bloodstains on his body, and suddenly said, you sent a message because of this? Yes. This old man thought someone was impersonating you. The Vice Pavilion Master nodded. Blame me. No prophet will tell you about this. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that the change in the bloodline power would cause such a big misunderstanding. Boom. At this time, another terrifying aura descended. Who are you? How dare you impersonate Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi? Accompanied by a bone-chilling shout, Shengguan Fengluan descended above Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked up at Shengguan Fengluan with astonishment. Did Shengguan Fengluan also misunderstand? Say it. Shengguan Fengluan shouted. She looked like she was ready to fight at any moment. Calm down. We are all in person and we will compensate 10 times if it is fake. The two hurriedly said. And Shengguan Fengluan frowned, and finally saw the Vice Pavilion Master's shadow, and said, it seems that the Vice Pavilion Master is also distinguishing between the real and the fake. One is purple gold dragon blood, and the other is ordinary blood. This will inevitably make people suspicious. The Vice Pavilion Master laughed. Yes. I received Wang Yun's message on the way, and I immediately came here to check. After Shengguan Fengluan finished speaking, she looked at Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi, and said, what is going on? Since the Vice Pavilion Master could send a message to Qin Feiyang, it meant that the identity of Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi was indeed not a problem, because the image crystal could only be opened by the owner. But why did the purple gold dragon blood become an ordinary bloodline power? Chapter 2239. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly and said, it's because of the ancestor. Ancestor? The Vice Pavilion Master and Shengguan Fengluan were stunned. They asked in unison, are you talking about Qin Batian? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Shengguan Fengluan said, you've seen him? Yes. We were able to escape from the deepest part because of the ancestor's help. Qin Feiyang briefly explained the situation at that time. So that's how it is. Shengguan Fengluan and the Vice Pavilion Master were enlightened. The Vice Pavilion Master smiled and said, I'm sorry for making such a big mistake. Shengguan Fengluan also looked apologetic. It's okay. You're just concerned about me. Qin Feiyang smiled. Since your bloodline power has been concealed, as long as you change your appearance now, the dragons won't be able to find you, right? Shengguan Fengluan said. Yes. After dealing with the ancestral dragon of the Fire Dragon clan, I'll prepare to disappear. Qin Feiyang said. Then where do you plan to go? The Vice Pavilion Master asked. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I'll go to Dongling Western Desert and Southern Wasteland to find people. I'll have to rely on you then. Rely on us? The Vice Pavilion Master and Shangguan Fenglan looked at each other, a trace of doubt in their eyes. Qin Feiyang said, as long as you have a teleportation altar that directly leads to these 3 regions. So that's what you're thinking? Shangguan Fenglan nodded and said, but there are too many people in Nine Heaven Palace. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. The teleportation altar of Nine Heaven Palace was on the square above the stairway to heaven. There were many people coming and going. Moreover, activating the altar would cause a huge commotion and would definitely alarm others. The Vice Pavilion Master said, it's indeed not appropriate to go to Nine Heaven Palace. Come find me when the time comes. I'll send you there. Thank you. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other and hurriedly cupped their hands to thank him. Once this Vice Pavilion Master opened his mouth, he would be doing them a huge favor. The Vice Pavilion Master asked, are you really confident in dealing with the ancestral dragon? Even if he has a heaven-defying divine artifact, he still has to die. Qin Feiyang said. All right. Then this old man will wait for your good news. The Vice Pavilion Master laughed in a hoarse voice. After the shadow of the Deputy Pavilion Master dissipated, Qin Feiyang looked at Shangguan Fenglan and asked, is your sister all right? If it were you, would you be able to handle it? Shangguan Fenglan rolled his eyes at him. How can you blame me? It was your and Hua Yi's idea. Qin Feiyang said. I didn't say I was blaming you. Although she is very sad now, at least we have achieved our goal. Also, you'd better not stay here. Because a lot of people are looking for you right now. It's inevitable that they'll come here. Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, all right, then let's go to Turtle King Island. Anyway, Turtle King Island is the only way to the northern region. Then you guys be careful. After all, it's the ancestral dragon. We can't be careless. Shangguan Fenglan said. I know. Qin Feiyang replied. Speaking of Turtle King Island, he thought of Madman and asked, how is Madman recently? Ever since you left the Nine Heavens Palace, he has been in seclusion. Now that he's not causing trouble, I'm still not used to it. Shangguan Fenglan laughed. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. What about Long Tianyu? He's fine too. Shangguan Fenglan said. Qin Feiyang nodded. Buzz. Suddenly, a buzzing and trembling sound came from Shangguan Fenglan's arms. Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and took out the image crystal. An illusory figure quickly condensed into form. It was the Grand Elder. Greetings, Grand Elder. Shangguan Fenglan bowed. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other and hurriedly bowed to the Grand Elder. You guys are here too. The Grand Elder looked at the two and smiled. The two nodded. But the Grand Elder ignored the two of them. His face darkened slightly as he looked at Shangguan Fenglan and said, go to the Divine Palace immediately. Go to the Divine Palace? Shangguan Fenglan was stunned. Just now, there was news from the Divine Palace that an old man broke into the Divine Palace with a girl and stole hundreds of billions of soul stones from us. The Grand Elder said in a deep voice. What? Shangguan Fenglan was dumbfounded. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi also looked at each other. They broke into the Divine Palace and stole hundreds of billions of soul stones. Who had the guts to do so? Who had the ability to do so? The Grand Elder looked at Shangguan Fenglan and said, this old man is not joking. Let's go and take a look immediately. Okay. Shangguan Fenglan nodded and turned off the image crystal. She said a few words to Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi, then opened an altar and quickly left. Brother Hua, are you sure the Grand Elder is not joking? Qin Feiyang frowned. Hua Yi was speechless. How could the Grand Elder joke about this kind of thing? Then, Qin Feiyang's heart was filled with disbelief. One had to know. This Divine Palace was the secret base of Empyrean Palace. Only disciples who had reached the level of Paragon God were qualified to enter the Divine Palace. One could imagine how terrifying the Divine Palace's foundation was. But now someone actually ran to the Divine Palace and stole hundreds of billions of soul stones? And it was only one old and one young. If this was true, then how terrifying was the strength of this old and young man? Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, where is the Divine Palace? There were many rumors about the Divine Palace in Empyrean Palace and Nine Dragons City. Some said that the Divine Palace was in the Sky Dragon Sea. Some said that the Divine Palace was in other forbidden areas. Some said that the Divine Palace was hidden in a remote corner of the northern region. In short, there were different opinions. But there weren't many people who really knew. However, as the disciple of the Vice Palace Master, Hui should know the exact location of the Divine Palace. Hui pondered for a while, shook his head and said, "To be honest, I really don't know the location of the Divine Palace." Trying to trick me again? Don't forget, you were the one who told me about the existence of the Divine Palace. Qin Feiyang said. Is that so? Why don't I remember? Hui laughed. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. He remembered clearly that when he entered the Saint Peak, Hui had mentioned the Divine Palace. But he didn't force it. Because of Hui's personality, he had a rough idea. If he didn't want to say something, even if there was a knife on his neck, it would be useless. Putting down the doubts in his heart, Qin Feiyang set off and flew towards Turtle King Island. Dealing with the ancestral dragon was the top priority. Turtle King Island. It was as calm as ever. Although Madman hadn't been here for a long time, the nearby sea beasts still regarded this place as a forbidden area and didn't dare to set foot on it. Qin Feiyang stood above Turtle King Island and scanned the surrounding sea. After a while, he turned to look at Hui and said, "I don't know when they will arrive. Why don't you guard outside while I go to the castle to cultivate?" "Why don't I go cultivate while you guard outside?" Hui said in dissatisfaction. "You have such a strong cultivation base, yet you still need to cultivate?" Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him, ignored him, and went straight into the castle. The originally empty hall was now neatly arranged with a coffee table, tables, chairs, and so on. And it was spotless. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at Fire Lotus, who was squatting on the ground and wiping the coffee table, and said with a smile, "You're quite fast. This is just a simple fiddle." Fire Lotus stood up and smiled. "A table and a coffee table are enough," Qin Feiyang said. "Not enough, not enough. Since it's a home, then it must be properly arranged. Send me to the Black Tortoise world now. I'll go buy some things such as bookshelves, desks, carpets, potted plants, and decorations on the wall." Fire Lotus said. "Is there a need to go through so much trouble?" Qin Feiyang was helpless. "Of course there is. In short, don't worry about it. Just leave these trivial matters to me," Fire Lotus said. "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded. Suddenly, he noticed that there was an additional name on the doors of the 3 cultivation rooms on the left side of the hall. The first cultivation room was his name, Qin Feiyang. The name of the second cultivation room was ingrained with the words Ingrate. The third cultivation room was the name of the Fire Lotus. "You are," Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "This is the white-eyed wolf's idea." It said that since there are extra rooms now, there is no need to squeeze together. Everyone can have one room. Let me think about it. It makes sense. That's why we wrote our names. Fire Lotus smiled. "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Then send it to the Black Tortoise world," Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and Fire Lotus disappeared. "I'm really bored." Subsequently, Qin Feiyang shook his head and entered the cultivation room. There were no changes in this room. The altar, iron box, pill scripture, pill furnace, and pill fire were all in their original positions. 1 day is equivalent to 10 years. "I have to hurry up and cultivate," Qin Feiyang muttered. He took out a large pile of soul stones and sat cross-legged on the ground, beginning to refine them. Chapter 2240. In the blink of an eye. Outside, half a year had passed. Half a year, 180 days. Inside the castle, 1,800 years had passed. Qin Feiyang had already calculated the time needed to break through from the initial stage of the Divine Lord Realm to the initial stage of the Divine Lord Realm. After breaking through to the initial stage of the Divine Lord Realm, he could refine about 500 soul stones a day. And from the initial stage of the Divine Lord Realm to the initial stage of the Divine Lord Realm, he had to refine 1 billion soul stones. 1 billion divided by 500 was 2 million. Then converted into years, It was 5,480 years. In other words, if it was outside, Qin Feiyang would need more than 5,000 years to break through to the initial stage of the Divine Lord realm. But if it was calculated according to the time in the castle, 1 day was 10 years, 10 days was 100 years, 100 days was 1,000 years. 5,480 years meant that he only needed 548 days. It was about a year and 5 months. In a year and 5 months, he could break through from the initial stage of the Divine Lord realm to the initial stage of the Divine Lord realm. And now he had been in seclusion for 6 months. In other words, now he only needed another 11 months of seclusion to step into the initial stage of the Divine Lord realm. Even he himself felt that this speed was unbelievable, let alone others. During this period, Fire Lotus had also completely decorated the castle. The originally pitch-black castle had now become luxurious and majestic. There was a furry carpet on the ground. On the walls and stone pillars, there were all kinds of decorations and portraits hanging. In the corner of the hall, the stairs, and the corridor on the second floor, there were exquisite potted plants. There were lush green trees. There were colorful flowers. Even in the cultivation rooms, Fire Lotus had placed exquisite beds, desks, bookshelves, and so on. And whether it was the hall or the rooms, there were milky white gems hanging. Like lights, they lit up the entire castle. In Fire Lotus's words, although cultivators didn't need to sleep, they still needed to rest occasionally. Moreover, with these things, it was like a complete home. In Qin Feiyang's room, Fire Lotus had meticulously decorated it. The floor was covered with a snow-white carpet. On the left, there was a desk, bookshelf, and chair neatly placed. On the table, there were a few small potted plants with beautiful flowers. On the most eye-catching wall hung 8 portraits. They were Emperor Qin, Emperor Hong, Emperor Chen, Mermaid Princess Tantai Li, and Qin Feiyang's grandfather Lu Yin and his parents. These portraits were all drawn by Fire Lotus herself. Everyone's expressions were drawn vividly, as if they were real people. From this, it could be seen that Fire Lotus had put in a lot of effort. Roar. It was also this morning. The roars of beasts came from the distant sea, breaking the silence. Qin Feiyang, something's wrong. Huiyi's voice also transmitted into the ancient castle. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang immediately opened his eyes. 2 rays of light burst out from his eyes. Then he got up and looked at the desk and bed. Then he looked at the portrait on the wall. He couldn't help but smile. What an adorable girl. Muttering to himself, Qin Feiyang left the ancient castle and appeared beside Huiyi. Look! Huiyi pointed to the sea in front. Qin Feiyang looked up and saw that the sea in front of him was full of rolling waves, covering the sky and the sun. In the waves, the roars of beasts were endless. It was unknown how many sea beasts were rushing over here. This is a beast tide? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Yes. It's a beast tide. But as far as I know, there has never been a beast tide at the edge of the Sky Dragon Sea. Hui said. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Dragons, Hui said in a deep voice. Dragons, Qin Feiyang whispered. Although we expected that the dragons would search the Sky Dragon Sea, we didn't expect that the dragons could command these sea beasts. Hui said. Qin Feiyang said, You mean the ancestral dragon ordered the sea beasts of the Sky Dragon Sea to help find us? It must be so. Otherwise, how could the dragons come here so quickly? Hui said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, We haven't sensed the aura of the divine dragon yet. Don't rush to a conclusion. Hui nodded. The two stared at the sea in front of them without blinking. The beast tide was getting closer and closer to Turtle King Island. Boom. All of a sudden, a terrifying dragon aura surged from the back of the beast horde. It's dragon might. Huiyi's gaze trembled. They were no stranger to this dragon might. It was the dragon might of the ancestral dragon. It's really him, Qin Feiyang muttered. There were countless sea beasts in the Sky Dragon Sea. Asking them to help would naturally save a lot of time. This ancestral dragon was also smart. Boom. Crack. The beast tide had already entered Turtle King Island. Where it was, huge waves rolled and the island sunk. This was a disaster. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it would be if this beast tide entered the north region. Get ready. Hui took a deep breath and said. Qin Feiyang nodded, his figure flashed, and disappeared without a trace. Dragons, Hui murmured. In his eyes a strong cold light burst out. An aura burst out from his body. No one can pass through this place. With a low roar, flames emerged and swept across the sky in an instant, carrying a destructive aura, pouncing towards the beast tied in front. And it's him. He is one of the people that the dragons are looking for. The beast tied was in an uproar. Yes, I am the person that the dragons are looking for. Hui smiled coldly, and the flames formed by divine power covered the sky and earth, instantly obliterating a large number of sea beasts. The sea suddenly turned blood red. What? So strong? Quickly retreat. Seeing this, the sea beasts behind hurriedly turned around and fled in horror. What a bunch of useless trash. But at this time, accompanied by a cold snort, a burly man stepped on the waves and entered Hui's line of sight. Yes, he was the ancestral dragon of the Fire Dragon clan. It was still the same as last time, arrogant, overbearing, and supercilious. Hui's pupils contracted. Where's Qin Feiyang? Ancestral Dragon spoke as he walked towards Hui step by step, looking at him as if he was looking at an ant. Hui's eyes flashed as he smiled and said, If I say that Qin Feiyang is dead, would you believe me? Dead. Ancestral Dragon was stunned. Immediately after, a hint of killing intent flashed in his eyes. It doesn't matter if you don't say it. Anyway, as long as he is in the northern region, he can't escape from this lord's palm. But you are somewhat beyond this lord's expectations. You actually have a half-step immortal realm cultivation. You shouldn't be an ordinary person, right? Tell this lord, who are you? Ancestral Dragon looked at Hui arrogantly. What if I don't say it? Hui joked. It doesn't matter if you don't say it. After killing you and reading your memories, I will naturally know your identity. You better pray that it has nothing to do with the Nine Heavens Palace and the Treasure Pavilion. Otherwise even the Nine Heavens Palace and the Treasure Pavilion will be destroyed today because of you. Ancestral Dragon laughed coldly. Although he didn't come to the northern region often, he knew the general situation of the northern region, eastern tomb, western desert, and southern wilderness. Only super forces like the Nine Heavens Palace and the Treasure Pavilion had half-step immortal realm experts. Therefore, he suspected that Hui was from the Treasure Pavilion or the Nine Heavens Palace. Destroyed? Hui was slightly taken aback and sneered. I think the one who will be destroyed today is not the Nine Heavens Palace and the Treasure Pavilion, but you. You still dare to be arrogant when you are about to die? Do you think that Qin Batian will come to save you today? Die for this lord. Ancestral Dragon took a step forward, and the void instantly shattered. His terrifying aura was earth-shattering, and the Turtle King Island below was instantly turned into ashes. I have long wanted to experience the strength of the Fire Dragon clan's Ancestral Dragon. Hui sneered, and his aura surged out as he pounced towards Ancestral Dragon. Boom. The two auras collided. Hui spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed into the sea below like a meteor. A mere half-step immortal realm expert dares to fight with this lord? You are truly foolish. Ancestral Dragon's eyes were full of contempt. Boom. But before his voice faded, a monstrous flame rushed out of the sea and instantly drowned Ancestral Dragon. Immediately after, Hui rushed out of the sea, and his divine power surged, condensing into a fiery red giant sword. The giant sword was thousands of feet long, and waves of fire surged, its sharpness peerless. Following Hui's roar, the giant sword tore through the sky and slashed towards Ancestral Dragon. However, Ancestral Dragon only raised his arm and caught the giant sword. The giant sword could no longer descend, and it stopped in the void. Moreover, the flames that drowned him did not cause him the slightest bit of harm. An ant will always be an ant. You will never understand the power of this lord's realm. Ancestral Dragon grabbed the giant sword, and his face was full of contempt. His voice faded. His 5 fingers slightly exerted force, and the giant sword, accompanied by a loud clang, shattered into pieces. Puff! Hui spat out again, and his eyes were full of shock. This Ancestral Dragon's strength was too terrifying. and it was completely crushing. Qin Feiyang, are you done? I can't hold on any longer. Huai roared anxiously. He had never thought of defeating Ancestral Dragon, and was purely stalling for time. Chapter 2241. Black Tortoise Realm. South of the Devil's Land. Here, there was a sea of blood. Above the sea of blood, Qin Feiyang held a blood-colored long sword, standing in the killing zone, crazily absorbing blood. In the void in front of him, there was another scene. It was the scene of Huai and Ancestral Dragon fighting. Naturally, he couldn't let Huai fight with Ancestral Dragon outside, so he had been paying attention to the situation outside since he entered the Black Tortoise Realm. Because of this, he saw the process of Huai and Ancestral Dragon fighting, as well as Huai's request for help. This made him a little puzzled. Huai's strength was undeniable. Half-step Immortal Realm. With this cultivation, he was probably a top powerhouse in the Divine Prefecture. As for Ancestral Dragon's cultivation, needless to say, he had definitely surpassed the half-step Immortal Realm. With such a big gap in cultivation, it was normal for Huai to not be his opponent. But what made him puzzled was that Huai had never activated a Divine Art, Battle Soul, or Divine Artifact. Even the giant sword from before was just an ordinary attack condensed from Divine Power, and not evolved from a Divine Art. No Divine Art? No Battle Soul? No Divine Artifact? This was definitely impossible. But why didn't Huai use these methods and directly ask him for help? Was Huai hiding something? In other words, was Huai worried that if he showed these methods, he would be recognized? Wait. Huai was the disciple of the Vice Palace Master. How could a mere disciple's cultivation be so strong? One must know. As the Law Enforcement Hall Master, Shangguan Fenglan had not reached this level. Disciple, Vice Palace Master, Palace Master token. And the handwriting is similar to the Vice Palace Master's. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled slightly. Could it be that, as Mu Tianyang had guessed, this Huai was the Vice Palace Master of the Nine Heavens Palace? Outside, Huai screamed as he was once again blasted into the sea below by Ancestral Dragon, setting off huge waves of hundreds of feet. However, Ancestral Dragon did not take advantage of the victory to chase after him. He glanced at the sea below and the surrounding void. He was very concerned about Huai's request for help. Compared to Huai, Qin Feiyang was a bigger threat. So, he was looking for Qin Feiyang. Since Huai was asking for help, then Qin Feiyang must also be here. There was no one in the sea? There was no one in the void? Could it be that he was hiding in a spatial divine object to absorb the blood? Boom. With this thought in mind, he immediately released his inner sight to cover the entire area. It's really here. Immediately, a cold light flickered in his eyes as a wave of divine power emerged and blasted towards the Black Tortoise world. What? He can actually capture the Black Tortoise realm? Qin Feiyang was shocked. One had to know that the Black Tortoise world was not a spatial divine object, it was an independent small world. In the past he had faced so many experts, but none of them had been able to capture the Black Tortoise realm. Qin Feiyang, leave the Black Tortoise world immediately. The child's voice immediately sounded in the sky above the Devil's Land. Qin Feiyang's heart sank. This sudden turn of events directly caught him off guard. Was he going to repeat the same mistake again? Hurry up. Otherwise, the Black Tortoise realm will be destroyed. The little boy's voice sounded again, incomparably anxious. Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and decisively left the Black Tortoise world. Without hesitation, he slashed at the Ancestral Dragon's divine power. The Ancestral Dragon sneered. It's really absorbing blood. Qin Feiyang's face was as gloomy as water. Last time it was because there was no blood to absorb. But this time he had made sufficient preparations in advance, but he was still unable to fully activate the slaughter domain. Compared to the last time, this made him even more aggrieved and unwilling. You're stupid. Don't you know to go to the ancient castle first before coming to the Black Tortoise world? The little boy's voice sounded again. There was a hint of disappointment in it. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Qin Feiyang slapped his head, decisively withdrew the blood sword, and disappeared in an instant. If he went to the ancient castle first, then to the Black Tortoise world, then the Black Tortoise world would not be exposed outside, but inside the ancient castle. With the ancient castle's ability, it would not be a problem to withstand the ancestral Greygon's attack. Boom. Just as Qin Feiyang left, the ancestral Greygon's divine power bombarded the exposed ancient castle. The ancient castle suddenly shook violently. Everything that Fire Lotus had carefully arranged was destroyed in an instant. At the same time, Fire Lotus and White-Eyed Wolf also ran out of their respective cultivation rooms. Looking at the ruined ancient castle, Fire Lotus frowned. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and smiled. Seems like you'll be busy for a while. There's no other way. The ancestral Greygon is too strong. Fire Lotus heard this and could not help but smile bitterly. White-Eyed Wolf frowned, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "There's no problem, right?" "Don't worry." Qin Feiyang smiled and entered the Black Tortoise world, continuing to absorb blood. Outside, seeing Qin Feiyang appear, Hui thought that he was saved, but he didn't expect that he would disappear again. His face immediately darkened. What an unreliable bastard. Looking at the ancestral Greygon again. At this moment he also had a face of disbelief. He had full confidence in his own strength. Even if Qin Feiyang hid, he could easily destroy the spatial divine object. So, not only did he not take Qin Feiyang's disappearance to heart, he even had a face of ridicule. How could a mere spatial divine object block his divine power? But the result was that he never thought that it would actually block his divine power. This made it somewhat difficult for him to accept. At the same time, in his eyes, there was a trace of greed. To be able to block his divine power, it must be a heaven-defying divine object. The ancestral Greygon glanced at Hui. His eyes flashed with a sneer and shouted, "Qin Feiyang, come out immediately or this sovereign will kill your companion." "Don't misunderstand. I'm not his companion. I don't know him at all." Hui's face changed, and he quickly turned around and fled. The ancestral Greygon sneered. His divine power roared in all directions, and a giant enchantment appeared in an instant. Hui was immediately trapped in the enchantment. "I'm really not his companion. Have you ever seen a companion like him who doesn't save others and lives alone?" Hui roared anxiously. The ancestral Greygon turned a deaf ear and scanned the void, saying, "I'll say it one last time, come out immediately." "He won't come out. Because I have nothing to do with him at all. We're just using each other. It's useless for you to use me to threaten him," Hui said. "Is that so?" The ancestral Greygon smiled playfully. Hui nodded like he was pounding garlic. "Then I'll test it and see if it works or not." The ancestral Greygon's big hand grabbed the air, and a giant dragon claw about 100 feet long appeared, exuding a world-destroying divine power. "Damn. It's actually a legendary divine art. Is there a need for this?" Hui's expression changed greatly, and he quickly turned around and waved his fist, bombarding the divine power enchantment. However, no matter how he bombarded it, the enchantment did not break. The ancestral Greygon smiled coldly, and the giant dragon claw suddenly released a shocking destructive aura towards Hui. "Qin Feiyang, you heartless person, quickly save me." Hui roared, his face pale. But Qin Feiyang still did not appear. "Sigh." Hui helplessly sighed, turned around and looked at the giant dragon claw, then looked at the ancestral Greygon, and said, "It seems that I really have to bring out some strength." And the ancestral Greygon looked at him suspiciously. "Look, what's that?" Suddenly, Hui pointed behind the ancestral Greygon and shouted. The ancestral Greygon instinctively turned his head, but there was nothing behind him. "You dare to play with this sovereign?" The ancestral Greygon was furious. But at the same time, a loud Kacha sound rang out. The ancestral Greygon quickly turned his head and looked towards the source of the sound, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. He saw that the divine power enchantment had actually shattered. Looking at Hui again, he fled like a rabbit with a swoosh. How is this possible? Half-step invincible realm can actually break the divine power enchantment that this sovereign had set up. The ancestral Greygon murmured. Boom. The giant dragon claw whistled and blasted on the broken enchantment. The divine power enchantment completely collapsed. That destructive aura was annihilated in all directions. Huai fled without looking back, his face full of fear. Fortunately, he escaped quickly, otherwise he would have been smashed to pieces like the enchantment. Where do you think you're going? But at this moment, accompanied by a shout, four middle-aged burly men shot over from the distant void and surrounded Huai. And Huai raised his eyebrows. These four people were also exuding a terrifying dragon aura. But their cultivation was not very strong, not yet at the half-step invincible realm. The four people were aggressive, instantly approaching Huai. The corner of Huai's mouth lifted, his eyes filled with killing intent, and he sneered. You think you can stop me? The ancestral Dragon came back to his senses, and seeing the four people's actions, his face changed slightly, and he immediately shouted, Retreat! Retreat? The four people were slightly taken aback, and when they looked at Huai again, they could not help but change their expressions. They did not notice before that they could not see through this person's cultivation. Hey! Huai grinned. His aura rolled out, and the four people were immediately imprisoned in the void, and then he attacked like lightning. Accompanied by four screams, the four people died on the spot, and blood dyed the sky. Damn it! The ancestral Dragon roared. Huai smiled, turned to look at the ancestral Dragon and said, If I remember correctly, there were a total of 11 auras in the deepest part, including you. In other words, there were a total of 11 auras, including you. No. There were 2 who went to inform you, so there were 13 in total. Now that I've killed 4, there are 8 other than you. I believe that they should have heard the commotion and are on their way. They can't beat you, but it's easy to kill them. Huai chuckled. The ancestral Dragon's face sank, and he asked, How do you know that there were 2 who went to inform this sovereign? I saw it with my own eyes. By the way, I forgot to tell you that the other 28 fire dragon have been killed by us. They died in the heavenly dragon sea. Huai joked. What? The ancestral Dragon's body trembled, and his eyes suddenly turned blood red. They died quite miserably. But their dragon meat is really delicious. I can't help but drool when I think about it. Huai said. Bastard. The ancestral Dragon could no longer hold back the anger in his heart, and he roared. Rumble. Divine power gushed out like a tide. Giant dragon claws were constantly condensed, and they were densely packed, covering the sky and emitting a destructive aura. Don't, I'm joking. Huai hurriedly waved his hand. Go to hell. How could the ancestral Dragon listen to him now? As he waved his hand with all his strength, the giant dragon claws suspended in the sky were like towering mountains, and they rushed towards Huai. Chapter 2242. Where did the battle come from? It's so terrifying. The people from Nine Heavens Palace and Sky Dragon City, who were closest to the Sky Dragon Sea, felt the terrifying aura of the ancestral dragon. Everyone was bewildered. Whoosh! Accompanied by the sound of air being torn apart, a group of people flew to the sky above the coast, looking at the rolling waves with shock on their faces. The leader was really the first elder. Shangguan Fenglan was also among them. There were a total of more than a dozen people, all of whom were big shots of Nine Heavens Palace. At this moment, they looked at the sky above Turtle King Island with fear in their eyes. Whoosh! Another old man descended. It was the Vice Pavilion Master. The Vice Pavilion Master asked, Are they fighting? Yes. I can sense Huai's aura. He's actually a half-step imperishable realm. Shangguan Fenglan said in disbelief. Half-step imperishable realm. The Vice Pavilion Master's pupils shrank, and he said in a deep voice, Even a half-step imperishable realm is no match for the ancestral dragon. There's nothing we can do about it. Nine Heavens Palace and your treasure pavilion cannot interfere in this battle. The first elder said. Then pray. The Vice Pavilion Master sighed. Above Turtle King Island. Turtle King Island had long disappeared. Those densely packed giant dragon claws seemed to want to destroy this world. Let's talk nicely. There's no need to use violence. Huai roared. In fact, this was not the full strength of the ancestral dragon, because he had yet to restore his true body. But even so, millions of miles of sea were dried up and destroyed under his aura. If he restored his true body and used his full strength, even the Sky Dragon Mountain Range and Sky Dragon City would be destroyed. Qin Feiyang, are you not done yet? Huai roared. Those giant dragon claws had already arrived. The destructive aura shrouded all directions, making him despair. Clang. But at this moment, a sword light appeared out of thin air, and the giant dragon claws were annihilated. Then, a figure covered in blood appeared in front of Huai. What? The ancestral dragon's eyes widened in anger. Haha, Huai was stunned, and then he laughed. Because the person who suddenly appeared was Qin Feiyang. The slaughter domain exuded killing intent. The blood-red sword was peerlessly sharp. Huai took a step forward and arrived beside Qin Feiyang. He looked at Ancestral Gragon and proudly smiled. Little bug, come at me again. If I take a step back, I'll be your grandson. Qin Feiyang. How could Ancestral Gragon have the time to care about him now? His eyes were fixed on Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, It's all thanks to the lesson you taught me in the deepest part last time. So this time, I prepared enough blood in advance and was just waiting for you. The ancestral dragon shouted, I don't believe that your divine art can defy the heavens. With a deafening noise, the divine bow was cut in half by the blood sword. This ancestral Gragon was dumbfounded on the spot. A weapon evolved from a mere divine art could actually cut a heaven-defying divine artifact? Haha. You still dare to be arrogant now? Huai laughed loudly. That excitement felt like he was the one who cut the divine bow. This lord doesn't believe it. Remove the seal for this lord and destroy him. Ancestral Gragon was furious as he stared at the divine bow and roared. Boom. A heaven-defying divine artifact, even if it was cut in half, could still exert the power to destroy heaven and earth. As Ancestral Gragon's roar fell to the ground, the divine bow released a monstrous power. Waves of flame surged out. This was all formed by the power of the law. At this moment, the aura exuded by the divine bow was many times stronger than before. It was like a peerless beast that was awakening from its slumber. And it was still soaring. Qin Feiyang, you can't let it remove its seal. Otherwise the entire northern region will suffer. Huai's face changed as he hurriedly shouted. Self-seal? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. This was the first time he heard of a heaven-defying divine artifact sealing itself. But now was definitely not the time to ask. Since Huai said so, then he must stop it immediately. The blood sword shot out like a bolt of lightning, like a graceful swan. Clang! Accompanied by a loud noise. The divine bow that was originally cut in two was cut into more than a dozen pieces on the spot. At that moment, the power of the law immediately dissipated. The aura of the divine bow was also disappearing. The light also dimmed. Fortunately, the seal was not broken. Huai patted his chest, his face full of fear. But Ancestral Gragon's face was extremely gloomy. Roar. Suddenly, he let out a loud dragon roar, like a bell ringing, shaking the heavens and the earth. Following closely, divine light shone from his body. A huge fire dragon roared out from the divine light. Its body was tens of thousands of feet long, like a majestic mountain ridge, and its dragon might was shocking. The most eye-catching thing was that there was a cluster of divine fire pattern between its eyebrows, like a fire lotus. That was the symbol of Ancestral Gragon. After restoring his true form, Ancestral Gragon's aura was much stronger than before. Terrifying waves of fire swept in all directions. The sea within a radius of millions of miles instantly dried up. Countless sea beasts were burned to ashes, leaving no bones behind. The Sky Dragon Mountain Range was also swept by the waves of fire. Flowers, plants, and trees were all turned to ashes, and even the mountains and rivers were melting. Great Elder and the others were dumbfounded. Old you, what else do you want to see? Come out and help. Suddenly, a violent shout sounded. An old figure landed in front of the first elder, and the others like a bolt of lightning. It was Shengguan Fenglan's master, Elder Wei. Sigh. After Elder Wei appeared, accompanied by a low sigh, another black-robed old man appeared. Elder Yu. As soon as this old man appeared, not only Shengguan Fenglan and the others, but even the deputy pavilion master's expression was extremely respectful. Elder Yu smiled at everyone, then landed beside Elder Wei and said, "You on the left, I'll on the right." Elder Wei nodded. Boom. Divine power roared out. Elder Wei's divine power flowed along the coast to the left. Elder Yu's divine power flowed along the coast to the right. In just an instant, the divine power of the two had extended tens of millions of miles away. Condense. Subsequently, the two shouted at the same time. Divine power surged, condensing into a barrier that was tens of thousands of feet tall, sealing the coast of the Sky Dragon Sea. The waves of fire were stopped above the sea. Although the waves of fire were blocked, the divine power barrier condensed by the two was also distorted under the impact of the waves of fire, as if it would shatter at any time. Just the waves of fire are so terrifying. Ancestral Gragon's strength is indeed strong. You all quickly go to Sky Dragon City, and let everyone evacuate immediately. Elder Yu looked at the Deputy Pavilion Master and the others and said, "Yes. Let them evacuate first. Lest we can't block it later and it affects them." Elder Wei also said. Shengguan Fenglan asked, "Master, what about our Jiutian Palace?" Elder Wei said, "Jiutian Palace is protected by a barrier, so it shouldn't be a big problem, but we still have to be prepared at any time." "Yes." Shengguan Fenglan nodded. Elder Yu shouted, "Go quickly." The Deputy Pavilion Master and the Great Elder immediately activated the teleportation altar and left. After Elder Yu sent them off with his eyes, he gazed at the sea and chuckled. The capabilities of this Qin Feiyong duo are truly not small. Yes. To be able to fight with Ancestral Gragon to this extent, there are only two people in our northern region. After Elder Wei finished speaking, he looked at Elder Yu and asked, "By the way, where's your Pavilion Master? Such a big thing happened, and he didn't show up? We've known each other for so many years. Don't you understand him? Even if the sky falls, he still has an indifferent attitude. Moreover, he has been to the Divine Land and knows the strength of the dragons better than us. So if he cannot show up, he will try his best not to." Elder Yu shook his head. Hearing this, Elder Wei could not help but smile helplessly. With the arrival of the Great Elder and the Deputy Pavilion Master and the others, Sky Dragon City, which was originally in a state of panic, fell into a complete panic. And the battle in the Sky Dragon Sea was still ongoing. Chapter 2243. The ancestral dragon roared. That huge body shattered the sky for millions of miles, exuding a world-destroying aura. Damn. They're going for real this time. Hui swallowed his saliva. That scared look didn't seem to be an act. Clang. However, Qin Feiyong wasn't afraid at all. The blood sword in his hand buzzed and trembled. Those blood-colored sword chi surged in the void around Qin Feiyong like a tide. "Qin Feiyong, you must die today," the ancestral dragon roared, opening his mouth to spit out a dragon breath. The meat of the ancestral dragon should be more delicious. Qin Feiyong laughed. Hui was stunned. He actually dared to provoke the ancestral dragon? "I've never eaten it. But it should be good." He also smiled very cooperatively. The ancestral dragon roared in anger, spitting out another dragon breath. 2 dragon breaths, shattering the sky. From afar, it looked like 2 meteorites flying from the sky, carrying a terrifying destructive aura, bombarding Qin Feiyong and Hui. "I just said one sentence. Do you have to target me?" Hui's face changed, turning around to run. "You're at least a half-step invincible realm expert, so useless." Qin Feiyong despised. He waved the blood sword in his hand. Crash. The blood-colored sword chi around him suddenly turned into a frenzy, going against the flow, bombarding the 2 dragon breaths. Boom, accompanied by a loud noise. The 2 dragon breaths were annihilated in an instant. Even a heaven-defying divine weapon can be easily cut, let alone an old bastard like you. Today I'll settle the score with you in the deepest part. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with killing intent. With a clang, the blood-colored long sword flew out of his hand, like a graceful swan, cutting through the sky. Roar. Immediately, blood light surged. A painful howl also sounded. The ancestral dragon's huge body was cut in 2 by the blood-colored long sword. Dragon blood like a waterfall, dyeing the sky red. Why is this happening? How could there be such a heaven-defying deity art in this world? The ancestral dragon roared hysterically. In his heart, he could not help but feel a sense of fear that could not be dispelled. Although you are one of the strongest existences in the ancient realm, you might know all the mysteries of the world. Now you will pay the price for your foolish actions. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. The blood-red sky above the ancestral dragon suddenly descended. A deathly aura instantly engulfed ancestral Gragon. In fact, it still had many tricks up its sleeve. For example, deity arts and fighting souls. But in its heart, there seemed to be a voice that kept telling it. Even if he were to use all of his trump cards, there was no way he would be able to defeat this blood-red sword. It couldn't help but feel despair. Whoosh! In its panic, it abandoned the remaining half of its body and the divine bow, turned around and fled for its life. Today you must die here. Qin Feiyang, lend me your blood sword. Seeing this, Huai took a step forward and arrived in front of the blood-red sword. Then he grabbed the sword hilt and threw it with all his strength. Whoosh! The blood-red sword shot toward the ancestral dragon like an arrow. Its speed was far from what Qin Feiyang could compare with. And the ancestral dragon had lost half of its body, so it couldn't use its speed advantage. Seeing that the blood-red sword was about to enter its head, the ancestral dragon should have felt the arrival of the Grim Reaper. But at this moment, an invisible aura swept out from the ancestral dragon's head and blasted toward the blood-red sword. Accompanied by a loud clanging sound, under Qin Feiyang and Hui's incredulous gaze, the blood-red sword actually shattered in an instant. The two were stunned and quickly looked at the ancestral dragon's head. But there was nothing. Then they looked at the ancestral dragon. At this moment, it didn't escape anymore. It was floating in the void, looking at Qin Feiyang and Hui. Its huge eyes were full of ridicule. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "What was that just now?" But the ancestral dragon didn't answer. It sneered. "I have to admit that your means are really strong, but that's all." "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the blood-red sword condensed again. "Do I look like I'm joking with you?" The ancestral dragon laughed, then lowered its head and said respectfully, "Welcome, Lord Dragon Sovereign." "Is that so? Dragon Sovereign?" Qin Feiyang and Hui suddenly turned pale with fright. Dragon Sovereign also came? The two scanned the surrounding void. Not only were their faces full of vigilance, but their hearts were also nervous to the extreme. The revered dragon was the strongest existence in the ancient realm. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was the ruler of the ancient world. How could such a peerless figure be someone they could shake? The most important thing was, the aura that appeared before could easily destroy the blood-red sword. If the owner of that aura was Dragon Sovereign, then it meant that the current level of the slaughter domain was still unable to confront Dragon Sovereign. It still needed to be strengthened. But the further the slaughter domain was, the more blood it needed. And now, the blood they had prepared in advance had been absorbed. So now they had no time to look for blood. The void here temporarily fell into a dead silence. Boom! When the ancestral dragon's voice dissipated, a terrifying aura suddenly emerged. That aura came from the top of the ancestral dragon's head. Following closely, a milky white light swept out from the top of the ancestral dragon's head. As soon as this light appeared, the heaven and earth here was suddenly filled with a sacred aura. It was like a divine king had descended, inviolable. Qin Feiyang and Hui couldn't help but tremble under this aura, and a sense of inferiority rose in their hearts. This aura, the coast. Old Wei and Old Yu looked at each other, and a trace of horror crept into their old eyes. "That's Dragon Sovereign's aura. Leave immediately." Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded in their minds. "What? Dragon Sovereign?" The two's body shook, and they immediately dispersed the barrier and escaped without looking back. But suddenly, the two stopped at the same time and scanned the void. Who was talking? "If you don't leave, you will all die." That hoarse voice sounded again. Hearing this, the two didn't stay any longer and immediately turned to leave. After the two left, an old man in his 70s and a woman in white appeared out of thin air above the coast. The old man's body was stooped, and he was holding a dirty walking stick. He was also wearing tattered linen clothes, and his white hair was messy like a chicken's nest. He looked very sloppy, but the woman in white next to him was dressed very cleanly. The woman looked to be in her 20s, and her white clothes were whiter than snow. Her black hair fluttered in the wind, and her facial features were extremely exquisite. She was as beautiful and refined as a fairy. The woman in white supported the old man and turned to look in the direction where Old Wei and Old Yu disappeared, and asked suspiciously, "Master, is Dragon Sovereign very strong?" Of course. If she appeared in person, even this old man wouldn't be her opponent. The old man laughed hoarsely. If she's so strong, then wouldn't Brother Feiyang be in danger? The woman in white looked at the sea worriedly. Do you care about him very much? The sloppy old man asked. I don't know, because I can't remember what he has done for me in the past. But in my heart, I don't want anything to happen to him, the woman in white said. The sloppy old man patted the back of the woman's hand lovingly and said with a smile, "As long as you don't want anything to happen to him, then he will definitely be fine." Thank you, master. The woman in white said gratefully. The sloppy old man smiled slightly, looked at the sea of sky dragons and said with emotion, "Dragon Sovereign, how many years has it been? We meet again." With that, he brought the woman in white, ignored Dragon Sovereign's aura, and directly stepped into the sea of sky dragons. Above the sea, Qin Feiyang and Old Yu stared at the milky white light. Ancestral Graygon kept his head lowered, and was incomparably respectful. Gradually, in the light, a petite figure gradually appeared. What's going on? Could it be that the legendary Dragon Sovereign is a woman? The two were surprised. That figure became clearer and clearer. In the end, it was really the figure of a woman. She was about 1.75 meters tall, with a petite figure, wearing a milky white floor-length dress that moved with the wind. Her long hair was also milky white, as if a goddess had descended, and her entire body was surrounded by a sacred aura. But her true appearance could not be seen clearly, as it was covered by a milky white mist. The dignified overlord of the ancient world, the ruler of the dragons, is actually a woman. Huai was dumbfounded. To be precise, it was a female dragon. This was completely beyond imagination. After Dragon Sovereign appeared, he did not look at Qin Feiyang and Old Yu immediately, but looked at Ancestral Graygon and said, "Little Hua, you have disappointed me." "I'm sorry, Lord Dragon Sovereign." Ancestral Graygon's gaze trembled, and he hurriedly lowered his head and said, "Qin Feiyang's method is indeed a little unexpected, but if you let the Sunset God Bao remove its seal from the beginning, how could you fall into such a sorry state?" Dragon Sovereign said. His voice was like the sound of nature, crisp and pleasant, but it carried a supreme majesty. "Yes. It's all because of my carelessness. Please forgive me, Lord Dragon Sovereign." At this moment, Ancestral Graygon was as docile as a little lamb. One could imagine how terrifying Dragon Sovereign's strength was. "When you go back, reflect on yourself," Dragon Sovereign said. "Yes," Ancestral Graygon respectfully replied. At this time, Dragon Sovereign still did not look at Qin Feiyang and Old Yu. She raised her jade-like hand and grabbed the air. Qin Feiyang and Huai immediately retreated. They thought that Dragon Sovereign was going to attack them, but in the end, Dragon Sovereign's target was the half-body of Ancestral Graygon, and the Sunset God Bao that was cut into more than a dozen pieces. As she grabbed the air, the half-body and the Sunset God Bao flew towards Ancestral Graygon. "Thank you, Lord Dragon Sovereign," Ancestral Graygon respectfully said, and then put away the Sunset God Bao. And that half-body was also connected to Ancestral Graygon's body. Dragon Sovereign waved her hand again, and a milky light flew out and fused into the wound. Immediately, the broken wound was restored as before. This method, Qin Feiyang and Huai looked at each other. The severed dragon body was restored in an instant. This Dragon Sovereign's healing ability was too strong. "It's done." Dragon Sovereign smiled and finally turned around, looking at Qin Feiyang and Old Yu. Chapter 2244. Be careful. Huai said to himself. Although Long Zun didn't make a move, the invisible pressure made him almost suffocate. Qin Feiyang was the same. Even with the slaughter domain, It couldn't dispel the fear of Long Zun in his heart. Long Zun looked at the two for a moment, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Come with me, I won't make things difficult for your friend." So direct? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and asked, "Where to?" "Aren't you asking the obvious?" "Of course to Divine Land." Long Zun laughed. Her laughter was so pleasant to listen to. "Then why are you bringing me to Divine Land? Is it to deprive me of my bloodline power like my ancestor?" Qin Feiyang said. "Yes." Long Zun nodded. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. She really didn't hide it at all. Hui said, "Don't talk nonsense with her, quickly think of a way to escape." "Escape? She's right in front of us, how can we escape?" Qin Feiyang said to himself. "Go to the castle. The castle is a heaven-defying artifact, it can definitely stop her." Hui said. "Not necessarily. Even the ancestral dragon has a heaven-defying artifact, let alone Long Zun." Qin Feiyang said. "You know your limits. Even if you enter that spatial artifact of yours, it can't stop me." Long Zun looked at Qin Feiyang and said, How do you know what we're talking about?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. Long Zun smiled faintly and said, "One of my innate abilities is to hear the voice transmission of all living beings in the world." "An innate ability to hear voice transmission?" The two were dumbfounded. "Isn't this too outrageous?" Long Zun smiled and said, "Let's go, it's only a matter of time anyway, don't make any unnecessary struggles." "If you can't even struggle, then what's the difference between you and a salted fish?" Qin Feiyang said. "That may be the case, but it depends on who the opponent is." Long Zun chuckled. A monstrous majestic aura emerged. Qin Feiyang and Yi Zichen were immediately imprisoned in the void. Long Zun smiled faintly. "Do you still feel the need to struggle now?" The hearts of Qin Feiyang and Li Wuyo sank. Long Zun's strength was definitely more than one level stronger than Ancestral Dragon. Struggling may not be a good thing, because sometimes there is a price to pay for struggling. Long Zun raised a jade finger and pointed it at Hui, who was standing beside Qin Feiyang. God force surged from her fingertip. "What are you doing?" Qin Feiyang shouted. "This is the price I spoke of." Revered Dragon smiled. With a swoosh, a wisp of divine power shot out from his fingertip and blasted towards Hui's forehead. Qin Feiyang shouted, "Stop. I'll go with you." "It's too late." Long Zun smiled. "Damn it." Qin Feiyang roared. The blood-red sword in his hand trembled violently. But no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to swing the blood sword and break the restraints of the pressure. Sigh. Hui sighed. He simply closed his eyes and waited for death. Long Zun, it's been a long time. But at this moment, a hoarse laugh rang out. Following closely, an old man descended in front of Qin Feiyang and Li Wuyo. He raised his dirty hand and grabbed at the wisp of divine power. And Qin Feiyang's eyes widened. Hui heard the movement and hurriedly opened his eyes. When he saw the old man's actions, his eyes widened in anger. He actually grabbed Long Zun's divine power with his bare hands? Was this old man crazy? And at the same time, Ancestral Dragon's pupils suddenly shrank when he saw the old man appear. As for Long Zun, her face was covered by the mist, so no one knew if her expression had changed. In the blink of an eye, boom! Under the horrified gaze of Qin Feiyang and Li Wuyo, the old man grabbed Long Zun's divine power, and then gently clenched his 5 fingers. That wisp of divine power shattered on the spot. The shock in the hearts of the two could no longer be described with words. Shattering Long Zun's divine power with his bare hands. How strong was his cultivation base to do this? "Who is this old man? Do you know him?" Qin Feiyang secretly said. "I have no impression of him at all." Hui transmitted his voice. Qin Feiyang wanted to say something again, but his eyes suddenly trembled. Because behind him, there was another aura. And this aura was extremely familiar. He hurriedly turned his head, but he ignored Long Zun's majesty and couldn't turn his head at all. "Is that you?" Qin Feiyang asked softly. And Hui was slightly taken aback and secretly said, "Who are you talking to?" Qin Feiyang turned a deaf ear. His face was full of joy and a trace of anxiety. "Brother Feiyang." A pleasant laughter rang out. A woman in white walked in front of Qin Feiyang and turned to look at Qin Feiyang. It's really you. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. And Huai looked at the woman in white with a stunned expression. Isn't this one of the people Qin Feiyang is looking for? She seems to be called Lin, yes. Lin Yi. Lin Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. Brother Feiyang, long time no see. Hearing this long-lost address, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but burst into tears and said, It's good to recover your memory. I haven't recovered my memory yet. Lin Yi lowered her head and said, No. Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He thought that Lin Yi had recovered her lost memory, because only Lin Yi who recovered her memory would affectionately call him Brother Feiyang. It was precisely because of this that he was so excited. He even shed tears. But he didn't expect that he was happy for nothing. Lin Yi looked up at Qin Feiyang and asked, Is it because of my address to you that you have a misunderstanding? Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Although I haven't recovered my memory, you also know that Sister Mermaid and the others have told me everything between us. And since knowing these things, I have an inexplicable good impression of you, so I call you like before. If you are not used to it, I can change the address in the future. Lin Yi said. Qin Feiyang quickly said, It's okay. It's okay. Lin Yi smiled, turned to look at the old man and said, Master, please help Brother Feiyang regain his freedom. What the hell? This ridiculously powerful old man is actually her master. Hui's eyes almost popped out. Qin Feiyang was also shocked. What has Lin Yi experienced in the past few years? She actually found such a terrifying master? The sloppy old man chuckled and waved his hand without looking back. The coercion that imprisoned Qin Feiyang and Hui disappeared immediately. The two finally regained their freedom. Hui rubbed Qin Feiyang's shoulder and transmitted his voice. Brother, your confidant is a bit powerful. Don't talk nonsense. She is my sister. We grew up together. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Hui. So, you are still childhood sweethearts? Then you have to cherish it. Let's not talk about anything else. If you can marry her as your master, you can do whatever you want in the ancient world in the future. Hui snickered secretly. Qin Feiyang was too lazy to care about him. He looked at Lin Yi and asked suspiciously, Who is he? I don't know who my master is. I met him on the side of the road before. But master's strength is quite powerful. Even Long Zun may not be his opponent. Lin Yi smiled. Girl, don't say that. Facing Long Zun, this old man is still far behind. The sloppy old man said in a hoarse voice. Long Zun finally spoke with a hint of coldness in his words. You still have some self-awareness. In front of you, the overlord of the ancient world, who dares not to have some self-awareness? The sloppy old man smiled. What's the situation? Didn't your master easily crush Long Zun's divine power? And with a wave of his hand, he defeated Long Zun's aura. Why do you still say that he is far behind Long Zun? Hui looked at Lin Yi and asked suspiciously. I don't know. Lin Yi shook her head. The sloppy old man smiled hoarsely and said, Because the Long Zun standing in front of you is not the real Long Zun. Not the real Long Zun? Qin Feiyang and the other two were taken aback. Yes. This is just a clone that came with the ancestral dragon. This clone can only exert half of Long Zun's strength at most. The sloppy old man said. If his words weren't shocking, he wouldn't stop. A clone that could only exert half of his strength was already so ridiculously strong. How terrifying was Long Zun's true strength? Qin Feiyang and Hui couldn't help but set off stormy waves in their hearts. What level had Long Zun's cultivation reached? Long Zun glanced at Qin Feiyang and the other two, then looked at the sloppy old man and said in displeasure, Old fart, you really talk too much. The sloppy old man smiled and said, I can't help it. When I get old, my mouth becomes fragmented. Then why haven't you died yet? I thought you were already dead, but I didn't expect that not only are you still alive, but you have also accepted a disciple. You are about to enter the grave. Why do you still want to accept a disciple? Long Zun said. It's because I am about to enter the grave that this old man has to quickly accept a disciple. Otherwise, No one will inherit this old man's inheritance in the future. The sloppy old man smiled and said, "Humph. Then let me see if you have really reached the end of your life, or if you are just pretending." Long Zun took a step forward, raised his slender white jade hand, and slapped at the sloppy old man. "Retreat!" Qin Feiyang yelled. Hua Yi immediately rolled up Qin Feiyang and Lin Yi and retreated tens of thousands of miles away in an instant. At the same time, Ancestral Gragon also retreated like lightning. It's a bit difficult to test this old man's situation with just a clone. The sloppy old man chuckled, raised his arm and slapped. Boom. In an instant, the two collided together. A destructive aura instantly spread out in all directions with the two of them as the center. The void was annihilated, and the sky collapsed. It was like the scene of the end of the world, shocking the world. "Retreat again," Qin Feiyang yelled. "Retreat your sister. Hurry up and take us to the castle," Hua Yi said angrily. Qin Feiyang smiled embarrassedly, and the two immediately entered the castle. Just as the three disappeared, the destructive airwave surged, and the castle was blasted away on the spot. "Did you see that? With the speed of this airwave, where can I take you?" Hua Yi glared at Qin Feiyang angrily. Qin Feiyang gave a hollow laugh. With a wave of his hand, an image appeared above the hall. The sloppy old man and Long Zun were in a stalemate in the void, and neither of them took a step back. Ancestral Gragon was also blown away by the airwave. He looked extremely embarrassed. Chapter 2245. Ancestral Gragon had such a strong cultivation, but he couldn't stop the battle fluctuations of the two. What kind of powerhouses are Long Zun and the old man? Is this the castle? Hua Yi looked at the castle hall with his eyes full of surprise. He had also been to the castle before, but it was completely different from when he came in before. Qin Feiyang was speechless. "You're still in the mood to make a fuss here? What's wrong?" Hua Yi was suspicious. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the screen turned, locking in the direction of Sky Dragon Mountain Range. At this moment, the destructive airwaves were surging towards the Sky Dragon Mountain Range. Oh no! Hua Yi's face changed immediately. If this airwave enters Sky Dragon Mountain Range, it will definitely be a scene of misery and suffering. Even Ninth Heaven Palace and Sky Dragon City will suffer devastating damage. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. "I don't dare to go out. Even if I dare to go out, I can't stop it. Sigh. Now I only hope that the people of Ninth Heaven Palace and Sky Dragon City have already moved." Lin Yi said, "The people of Sky Dragon City have already moved when you fought with Ancestral Gragon, but Ninth Heaven Palace..." Speaking of this, Lin Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and couldn't help but let out a low sigh. "You should make it clear," Hua Yi urged. "Isn't it whetting people's appetite?" Shengguan Fenglan asked Old Wei at that time if the disciples of Ninth Heaven Palace should be evacuated. But Old Wei said that Ninth Heaven Palace is protected by a barrier, so there is no need to evacuate. As for now, it's probably too late. Lin Yi said. "What is this old man thinking?" Hua Yi said angrily. "You can't blame him for this, because he didn't know that Long Zun's clone would descend." Lin Yi said. Hua Yi was silent for a while and sighed. "It seems that we can only resign ourselves to fate." Lin Yi said. "If Master can deal with Long Zun's clone as soon as possible with Master speed, it should still be in time to stop that airwave." Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the screen turned again, locking on Long Zun and the old man. The two were in a deadlock. Destructive shockwaves continued to surge and spread in all directions. "You don't even have the ability to destroy a mere clone of your true body? Seems like you're really nearing the end of your lifespan," Long Zun sneered. The sloppy old man smiled and turned to look in the direction of the Sky Dragon Mountain Range. Obviously, he had also noticed that the Sky Dragon Mountain Range was about to face a destructive attack. "This old man has already said that you won't be able to find out about this old man's situation with just your clone." The sloppy old man turned around and smiled at Long Zun. He shook his arm and unleashed an even stronger and more terrifying god force like a flood that had just broken through a dam. "What?" Long Zun exclaimed. Amidst the cries of alarm, Her body rapidly dissipated without a single drop of blood. Sure enough, it was a clone. Old thing, the future is long. Just you wait. Several breaths later, Long Zun's body completely disappeared, leaving behind a cold voice that echoed in the sky above the sea for a long time. The sloppy old man chuckled and looked at ancestral Graygon in the distance. Go back and tell Long Zun that one day, the dragons will be destroyed in her hands. Tell her to take care of herself. After speaking, without waiting for ancestral Graygon to respond, he turned around and took a step forward, landing in the sky above the Sky Dragon mountain range. An invisible force emerged and swept across the sky. That destructive shockwave suddenly dissipated into nothingness. Ancestral Graygon looked at the old man. His pupils shrank slightly, and then he fled. Nearby, there were 8 burly men. They were the remaining 8 fire dragon. When they saw ancestral Graygon escape, they immediately turned around and fled into the depths of the sea without looking back. Fortunately, at the same time, Qin Feiyang and the other 2 appeared from the ancient castle. Seeing that the shockwave had disappeared, Hui couldn't help but let out a long breath. Ancestral Graygon. Qin Feiyang looked in the direction of ancestral Graygon's escape, his eyes flickering. Don't think about it. You can't catch up. Hui shook his head. Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed. If it weren't for Long Zun's clone, not only would ancestral Graygon die, but even the Sunset Divine Bow would become his. This was a heaven-defying divine artifact with the law of fire. It was a pity to miss it just like that. Swish. At this time, the sloppy old man landed beside Lin Yi. Greetings, senior. Qin Feiyang and Hui quickly bowed. If it weren't for this old man's help, they might have been corpses by now. The old man glanced at the blood sword in Qin Feiyang's hand and smiled hoarsely. The people of your Qin clan are indeed rare talents in the world. And Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Listening to this, why does it seem like he knows our Qin clan very well? The sloppy old man smiled and said, to tell you the truth, this old man has seen your ancestor, Qin Batian. You have seen my ancestor? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked, when? A long time ago. But these are the past. Let's not talk about it. The sloppy old man smiled. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Why do they like to keep me in suspense? Lin Yi asked. Brother Feiyang, what are your plans next? Looking for someone. Qin Feiyang said. Looking for who? Lin Yi was suspicious. Looking for you. Qin Feiyang sighed helplessly. Us. Lin Yi was even more puzzled. Yes. Looking for you, demon ancestor and Dong Xingyang. This is the task given to me by my ancestor. He also said that I must protect you well. Qin Feiyang said. I see. Then do you have any news about demon ancestor and Dong Xingyang? Lin Yi asked. No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Lin Yi looked at the sloppy old man. Girl, don't look at this old man. This old man can't help with this matter. You have not met for a long time. Let's chat for a while. This old man will go and see if there are any dragons nearby. After the sloppy old man finished speaking, he flickered and disappeared without a trace. Qin Feiyang asked curiously, who is this master of yours? I really don't know. I have asked him more than once, but he just doesn't say. Lin Yi was helpless. Hui said, I heard you say before that you met him on the side of the road. Since entering the ancient realm, I have been wandering aimlessly. One day, I entered a town and met my master on the side of a street. At that time he was sitting on the side of the street, dressed in rags, and had no breath on his body. I thought he was a beggar. Out of kindness, I gave him some divine crystals, and took him to a restaurant for dinner. Because his image was very bad, when he entered the restaurant, he had a lot of friction with the restaurant's waiter. After dinner, I didn't think much and left directly. But I didn't expect that the restaurant's waiter would embarrass my master after I left and snatch the soul stone I gave him. When I heard the news and went back to reason with them, not only did they not apologize, but they also attacked me. They even molested me. At that time, I had just entered the ancient realm not long ago. My cultivation had not changed yet. I was just a pseudo-god. My opponents were all war gods. I was definitely not their opponent. Just when I thought I was going to die, my master suddenly made a move and directly obliterated those guys. Only then did I know that my master was a hidden powerhouse. Later, my master took the initiative to accept me as a disciple. The reason was that I was very kind. At first, I thought it was funny. I thought he was joking, so I ignored him. But for the next few months, he followed me and helped me solve a lot of problems. I thought that he might have bad intentions. But after getting along with him, I found that he was a good person. Later, I agreed to be his disciple. Lin Yi smiled. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other after listening. They thought that there would be some thrilling experience, but they didn't expect it to be so plain. In other words, Lin Yi simply picked up a master on the side of the road. This luck is simply heaven-defying. In fact, I have heard of your deeds in the past few years. In just a few years, you have become famous in the North region. I am really happy for you. Lin Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. Qin Feiyang asked, "Then why didn't you come to me?" Lin Yi said, "Because I don't know how to face you." Qin Feiyang said, "Although you have lost your memory, we can still be like before. You are the younger sister, and I am the elder brother. What's so difficult to face? I thought so too. But I can't do it. Because I have no memory, I will panic in my heart. I can't face you calmly." Lin Yi said faintly. Her expression was filled with disappointment. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. If I had kept you by my side back then, you would not have been deceived by the demon ancestor." Qin Feiyang blamed himself. "It's all in the past. There's no need to mention it again. Moreover, in the past few years, I have been wandering around with my master. My heart has become a lot more stable. Maybe one day. It doesn't matter to me whether I have these memories or not." Lin Yi smiled. Looking at Lin Yi, Qin Feiyang felt guilty and said, "As long as you are happy. I am really happy now. You don't have to think about me. Concentrate on your business." Lin Yi said. Qin Feiyang said, "So you don't plan to go with me?" "I like my current life." Lin Yi did not answer directly, but this sentence was enough to explain her inner thoughts. "Okay. I won't force you." Qin Feiyang smiled. He actually wanted to protect Lin Yi. But now it was obvious that there was no need. Because it was safer to follow the sloppy old man than to follow him. Lin Yi asked with a smile, "Are Sister Mermaid and the others all right now?" "Pretty good." Qin Feiyang nodded. Lin Yi said, "I can see Sister Mermaid's feelings for you. You must not let her down." "Don't worry. I have hurt a lot of women who like me. I won't hurt her again. As for you, you have to find a man who loves you and takes care of you." Qin Feiyang smiled. Lin Yi blushed and said, "This kind of thing can't be rushed. It depends on fate. Just let nature take its course." "What do you mean by fate?" "Look at me. I'm very good." Hui chuckled. "Get lost. Believe it or not, I will tell Shangguan Fenglan." Qin Feiyang glared at him fiercely. Chapter 2246. I'm not afraid. It's normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Unlike you, you're like a piece of wood all day long. Boring. Hua Yi despised. Qin Feiyang's face was dark. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. Swoosh. At this time, the sloppy old man broke through the air like lightning and landed beside Lin Yi. "Girl, are you done chatting?" Lin Yi nodded. The old man smiled and said, "Then let's go." "Okay." Lin Yi nodded. "Little guy, keep working hard. The future of the ancient world depends on young people like you." The old man looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. Qin Feiyang bowed and said, "Thank you, senior, for your guidance. This junior will work hard. Please take good care of Yi. This girl is this old man's disciple. Of course, this old man will take good care of her. With this old man around, the dragons won't dare to lay their hands on her. But you. This time, the dragons have suffered such a great loss. They will definitely not let it go. Although Long Zun's original body can't come to the North region in person, the ancestral dragons, as well as the elders and patriarchs of various races, can leave divine land. So, before they come to hunt you down, You have to be fully prepared. The old man said. Can't come to the north region in person? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and said suspiciously, Senior, what do you mean? It means that Long Zun can't leave Divine Land. Otherwise, it would not be her avatar who came to you this time, but her original body. If her original body comes, even this old man can only retreat. The old man said. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other. This was really unexpected. Qin Feiyang looked at the old man and asked curiously, then why can't she leave Divine Land? The reason? You go and find out slowly. After the old man finished speaking, he looked at Lin Yi and smiled. Girl, let's go. Brother Feiyang, take care. Lin Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and said. You too. Qin Feiyang said. Lin Yi smiled, supported the old man, and stepped into the air step by step. What a gentle and kind woman. Qin Feiyang, I'm getting more and more confused. Why are you so popular with women? Hua Yi looked at Lin Yi's back and frowned. Qin Feiyang coughed dryly and proudly said, She's naturally charming. I can't do anything about it. Scram. Hua Yi glared at Qin Feiyang and said, Seriously, what is your relationship with her? Qin Feiyang was stunned and sighed. It's a long story. Hua Yi grinned and said, It's fine. We have plenty of time now. Take your time. You're a man. Why are you so nosy? Qin Feiyang glared at him angrily. Who said that gossip is exclusive to women? Can't men gossip? Never heard of equality between men and women? Hua Yi angrily said. Ugh. Qin Feiyang was astonished. He realized that he was powerless to refute. He sighed and said, I met her when I was 10 years old. We were together for 5 years. Those 5 years were the lowest point of my life. It was her and an old man who always accompanied me. They are really childhood sweethearts. Hua Yi murmured and asked, What happened later? Later, her father thought that I coveted her family's wealth. He came to humiliate me and set a trap to force us to separate. But even so, I still regard her as my sister. No matter what happens to her, I will stand in front of her. It was because of this that she developed feelings for me. I didn't want to hurt her, so I separated from her. I thought that time and distance could slowly erase this feeling in her heart. But the result was just the opposite. In the end, someone even used this to hurt her. She lost her memory because of this person. This person gave her a secret art called indifference secret art. This indifference secret art can greatly increase a person's talent and cultivation speed. But at the same time, she will gradually lose her memory. Qin Feiyang said. It turns out to be like this. Then, the person who gave Lin Yi the indifference secret art is the demon ancestor you mentioned before? Hua Yi asked. Qin Feiyang nodded. Hua Yi raised his eyebrows and said, Then why did your ancestor ask you to find him? Maybe it's because of his battle soul. He activated one of the top 10 battle souls, the Eye of Despair. Moreover, my ancestor and demon ancestor used to be very good brothers. Qin Feiyang said. Your relationship is too complicated. Hua Yi shook his head. It's a little responsible. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, turned to look at Hua Yi, and said, What's the matter with self-sealing? What self-sealing? Hua Yi looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, It's that sunset divine bow. Oh, you mean this? The power of this heaven-defying divine artifact is extraordinarily terrifying. If it fully recovers, it's enough to destroy a continent. Generally speaking, in order to avoid such a devastating disaster, this divine artifact will enter a state of self-sealing. In other words, more than half of its strength is sealed. For example, the Grey Castle is in a state of self-sealing. Of course, there is also another situation. For example, Mu Tianyang's blood blade, and your ancestor's heaven-defying divine artifact are all seals imposed by others. This kind of seal generally takes a long time to be removed. Hua Yi said. It turns out to be like this. Qin Feiyang suddenly realized and said, So the undead realm powerhouse can't be compared with the heaven-defying divine artifact. Of course. A powerhouse like Ancestral Dragon can only be compared with the sealed heaven-defying divine artifact at most. Hua Yi said. What about Longzuan? Qin Feiyang asked. I don't know about the dragons. After all, no one in the Northern Territory has seen her true body. However, from the strength of her clone, the strength of her true body should be able to contend with a fully activated heaven-defying divine artifact. But this is just speculation. It can't be taken seriously. Hui said. Qin Feiyang nodded and pondered for a while, then said, Then do you know the situation of my castle? My ancient castle also has a seal, but this seal changes according to my cultivation level. Hui was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion, saying, What do you mean? Qin Feiyang said, When my cultivation reaches a certain level, the castle will automatically remove a layer of seal. There's such a thing? Hui was surprised. Yes. Didn't you ask before why the castle changed? It's because I ate the body half a year ago that I broke through to the Divine Lord realm and removed the third seal. And the time array inside has also undergone a great change. In the past, 1 day was equivalent to 1 year, but now 1 day is equivalent to 10 years. Qin Feiyang said. 1 day is equivalent to 10 years. Hui was dumbfounded. This was too terrifying. If he didn't know Qin Feiyang, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Could the changes in the castle's seal be related to the companion? Companion? Hui looked suspicious again. I heard from my parents that when I was born, 2 heaven-defying divine artifacts accompanied me. One of them is the castle. Qin Feiyang said. There's such a thing? Hui's face was dull. 2 heaven-defying divine artifacts came as soon as he was born? Wait. 2. He suddenly quivered and quickly looked at Qin Feiyang, asking, You have another heaven-defying divine artifact? Yes. But it's not on me now. Qin Feiyang said. Fuck. Your birth is too strange. Hui was speechless. This was the first time he heard of a divine artifact accompanying a divine artifact. And it was 2 heaven-defying divine artifacts. Qin Feiyang said, I've been wondering about it too. Hui looked at Qin Feiyang and said, You wouldn't be the reincarnation of a peerless figure, right? Reincarnation? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. Although I don't know what the situation is, I can imagine that 2 heaven-defying divine artifacts accompanied you. It's definitely not a treatment that ordinary people can enjoy. It seems that I have to curry favor with you in the future. You are blessed by the heavens. If I follow you, my future will definitely be limitless. Hui laughed mischievously. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, Don't pretend, okay? Your strength has been exposed. There aren't many powerhouses like you in the northern region. What strength can I have? It's all good luck. Hui laughed embarrassedly. Qin Feiyang said playfully, I hope your luck can continue like this. Of course. I was born to be a person with a great destiny. Hui held his head high and laughed proudly. A row of black lines immediately appeared on Qin Feiyang's forehead. He really wanted to slap this pretentious guy to death. But business was business, private was private. This time, it was all thanks to Hui for stalling for time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have time to absorb the blood of the powerful ancestral dragon. Whoosh! Letting out a long breath, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the bloody sword and killing domain quickly dissipated. He said, Let's go and see if there are any casualties in Nine Heaven Palace and Sky Dragon City. Hui nodded and waved his hand, sweeping up Qin Feiyang and flying towards Sky Dragon Mountain Range. Qin Feiyang looked at Hui. Was this guy really the Vice Palace Master of Nine Heaven Palace? A half-step Undying Realm cultivator, who cared so much about Nine Heaven Palace. It wouldn't be convincing if he wasn't. But if Hui was really the Vice Palace Master of Nine Heaven Palace, then why did he follow him so shamelessly? What was his goal? Could it be that Hui had been trying to get close to him since they met in the treasure pavilion? What he couldn't understand the most was why Hui gave him an inexplicable sense of intimacy. Chapter 2247. Sky Dragon Mountain Range. When Qin Feiyang and Elder Yu flew out of the Sky Dragon Sea and landed on the coast, they looked at the mountain range in front of them with a touch of horror in their eyes. The Sky Dragon Mountain Range, which was originally lush with vegetation and ferocious beasts, was now like a land of death, Not a single blade of grass was left. The ferocious beasts were also nowhere to be seen. As far as the eye could see, it was dead silent. One had to know. Previously, it was just the fluctuations of the battle, and it caused so much damage. If the battlefield was in the Sky Dragon mountain range, what kind of scene would it be? It was hard to imagine. Swish. Suddenly, several figures came through the air. The leaders were really Elder Wei and Elder Yu. Next were the Deputy Pavilion Master, First Elder, Shengguan Fenglan, and a group of giants. Greetings, seniors. Qin Feiyang bowed. Elder Yu looked at Qin Feiyang and chuckled. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Senior, you flatter me. Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand. When he looked at Elder Yu, he was slightly stunned. It was actually a new face? Elder Yu smiled and said, I'm from the Treasure Pavilion. This is the first time we meet, young friend. Please take care of me in the future. Treasure Pavilion? Are you the Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion? Qin Feiyang said in surprise. No. I'm just an idle person in the Treasure Pavilion. Elder Yu waved his hand. You're not the Pavilion Master. Then what about the Pavilion Master of the Treasure Pavilion? Such a big incident, he should also appear. Qin Feiyang glanced at the crowd, but except for Elder Yu, they were all familiar faces. Elder Yu asked, Young friend, was it really Longzuan before? Elder Wei and the others also stared at Qin Feiyang. This was also what they wanted to know the most. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The group of people suddenly changed their expressions. Longzuan actually came to the northern region in person. But don't worry, it was just a clone of Longzuan. And Longzuan himself can't leave the Divine Land. Qin Feiyang smiled. Can't leave the Divine Land? Why? Everyone's faces were full of surprise. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, I don't know the specific reason. The Great Elder asked, Where is Longzuan's clone now? It's destroyed. Ancestor Dragon has fled back to the Divine Land. Qin said. Destroyed. The group of people couldn't help but gasp. Although it was just a clone, Dragon was Dragon, But now it's a dragon ancestor. What an incredible thing was this. Qin Feiyang didn't explain, because there was no need to. He said, the dragon race probably won't give up, so we can't let our guard down. Everyone's heart sank when they heard this. You must continue to carry out the arrest warrant for me and Hui. He was quite reliable in battle, but why did he become so unreliable when he was idle? Shengguan Fenglan was also very helpless. She glared at Hui and landed opposite Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang looked at her warily and said, Is it because of your sister again? Let me tell you, I will never do this kind of errand again. What are you thinking about? Shengguan Fenglan rolled her eyes at him and said, I'm here to tell you something. What is it? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Shengguan Fenglan said, This matter is related to the person you are looking for. And? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and said in surprise, Who did you find? Shengguan Fenglan waved her hand, and the phantom of a woman in white condensed out. Hui's eyes widened and exclaimed, Isn't she Lin Yi? Qin Feiyang asked, Where did you see her? Shengong. Shengguan Fenglan said. What? Shengong. Qin Feiyang and Hui looked at each other. Shengguan Fenglan said in a deep voice, Remember half a year ago, the Great Elder suddenly found me and asked me to go to the Shengong? Qin Feiyang and Hui nodded. At that time, the Great Elder also said that an old man and a young man ran to the Shengong and robbed hundreds of billions of soul stones. Wait a minute. This old man and young man, could it be Lin Yi and that old man? Shengguan Fenglan said. The one who robbed the soul stones is Lin Yi. Qin Feiyang and Hui looked at each other, and the corners of their mouths twitched. This was really a coincidence. Qin Feiyang asked, How many soul stones did they rob? A total of 800 billion. Shengguan Fenglan said. 800 billion. Qin Feiyang's face twitched. 800 billion soul stones. This was an astronomical number that he didn't even dare to think about. Shengguan Fenglan said, Because this Lin Yi has something to do with you. I will hide this matter from the Great Elder for the time being. In other words, Now the great elder still doesn't know that Yi did it, Qin Feiyang said. Many people in the Shengong saw this Lin Yi at that time. How can it be hidden from the great elder? What I mean is that the great elder still doesn't know that you are related to Lin Yi. If the great elder knows, he will definitely be angry again. He may even misunderstand that you are the one who instigated them to do this behind the scenes. Shengguan Fenglan said. Don't say it. This is really possible. Hui nodded. Then it's not the same thing to hide it like this. Qin Feiyang frowned. Shengguan Fenglan said. So I want to ask you, do you want to tell the great elder? Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, tell him. The innocent knows nothing, and the muddy knows nothing. I am not afraid of him misunderstanding. Okay. I will report to the great elder truthfully when I go back. Shengguan Fenglan nodded. Is there any news from the others? Qin Feiyang asked. No. In the past 6 months, the northern region has almost been turned upside down by our Nine Heavens Palace, but except for Lin Yi, there is no trace of the others. I think they should not be in the northern region, Shengguan Fenglan said. This is impossible. Qin Feiyang frowned. Putting aside Uncle Divine Beast and Fire Qilin because he couldn't be sure, Tanwu and Cerberus were definitely in the northern region. What about the major forbidden areas? Hui asked. Shengguan Fenglan said. Except for the Sky Dragon Sea, we have also searched. Hui looked at Qin Feiyang and said. It seems that they are really not in the northern region. Qin Feiyang said suspiciously. Then is it possible that they are in the Sky Dragon Sea? That depends on their cultivation. If their cultivation is strong enough, it is not impossible to train in the Sky Dragon Sea. Hui said. Cultivation? Qin Feiyang murmured. The cultivation of Tanwu and Cerberus was not very strong, let alone going to the Sky Dragon Sea. It was still a matter of whether they could pass through the Sky Dragon mountain range. It seemed that the possibility of training in the Sky Dragon Sea was not high. But, with the strength of Tanwu and Cerberus, it was impossible to run to Dongling, Western Desert, and Southern Wilderness in these few years. Forget it. Let's not care about them for now. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Uncle Yuan said that Tanwu's talent was very good, and he was allowed to develop freely in the ancient world, so there was no need to find him. The top priority was to find the demon ancestor and Dong Xingyang, and complete the task given to him by the ancestors. In this way he could enter divine land. Shengguan Fenglan looked at Qin Feiyang and said, there is one more thing. What? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Shengguan Fenglan said. The 10 soul lines that you snatched back then, can you return them to us? This, Qin Feiyang dodged her gaze. How could they return the soul lines that were already in their hands? Shengguan Fenglan said, return the soul lines to us, and the great elder may let bygones be bygones for Lin Yi snatching the 800 billion soul stones. To be honest, I am not afraid of the great elder pursuing this matter. Do you know who defeated the Long Zun's avatar before? He is Lin Yi's master. He is the old man who took Lin Yi to the Celestial Palace to snatch the soul stones. Qin Feiyang said. What? Shengguan Fenglan was dumbfounded. This is true, Hui said. This, Shengguan Fenglan's eyes trembled. She never expected that the old man was so powerful. Chapter 2248. Wait. I heard from Master that when Long Zun appeared, a voice suddenly told him and old Manu that Long Zun had arrived and asked them to leave quickly. Could the owner of this voice be Lin Yi's master? Shengguan Fenglan asked. Is there such a thing? We really don't know about this. But if there is a voice, then I think it should be him. Qin Feiyang said. Shengguan Fenglan said incredulously. Even Long Zun's clone can be destroyed. Who is he? Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, I don't know about this. Shengguan Fenglan frowned and looked at Hui. Don't look at me. We have also asked him, but even Lin Yi, his disciple, doesn't know his identity. Hui smiled bitterly. Shengguan Fenglan's face showed a trace of disappointment. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Anyway, you should return this soul vein to us. This, Qin Feiyang was really reluctant. How about this? Level 5 soul vein is not valuable to you at all because the production is too low. I will go directly to the Great Elder and get 10 billion soul stones for you. Shangguan Fenglan said. 10 billion. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. In the long run, soul vein was definitely more important than soul stones, because soul vein could produce soul stones continuously. However, soul stones were different. Every time he refined one, he would have one less. But in the current situation, soul stones were indeed more meaningful to him, because now what he lacked the most was soul stones. Although Zhao Tailai and others did not take away a single soul stone, and still had 30 billion soul stones, it couldn't withstand the consumption at all. Qin Feiyang secretly said, Hui, do you know how many soul stones a level 5 soul vein can produce in a year? I know. Level 1 soul vein can produce about 10 soul stones a year, and so on. In other words, a level 5 soul vein can only produce 50 soul stones a year. Hui transmitted his voice. So little? So even a level 9 soul vein can only produce about 100 soul stones a year. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes. That's why soul stones are so rare. However, when one soul line reaches the god level, there will be an earth-shaking change. For example, a rank 1 divine soul line can produce 10,000 soul stones in a year. Hui said. There's a god-class soul line? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Of course. Hui nodded and asked suspiciously, You've been in the Nine Heavens Palace for so long. How could you not know about this? I didn't ask around. I thought a class 9 soul line was the highest. Qin Feiyang thought. I won't submit to anyone but you. Hui was speechless. What have you been doing all day? How could he not know about this? Qin Feiyang smiled awkwardly. Although a class 9 soul vein can only produce 90 soul stones a year, it's only one step away from a god-class soul vein. So no matter if it's the Treasure Pavilion or the Nine Heavens Palace, they'll go all out to get a class 9 soul vein. Hui said again. Qin Feiyang was surprised and asked, So the soul vein can grow by itself? Yes. But if it only absorbs the essence of heaven and earth, the growth speed is very slow. So generally speaking, crystal veins are used to nurture the soul vein. Hui said. Crystal veins? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Why was it another unfamiliar thing? Crystal veins and soul veins are similar, but the difference is that soul veins produce soul stones, while crystal veins produce divine crystals. They're also divided into different grades. Hui explained. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and said, You mean using crystal veins to nurture soul veins will grow faster? Yes. Not only can crystal veins produce divine crystals, but the energy they emit is also very majestic. For example, the Nine Heavens Palace and the Treasure Pavilion basically use a large number of crystal veins to nurture soul veins. Hui said. Qin Feiyang asked, Are there many crystal veins? Of course there aren't many, but they're much better than soul veins. However, if a 9th grade crystal vein or a divine crystal vein appears, it will also cause a frenzy. Hui said. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, So, the value of a 5th grade soul vein is really not that high. Only you would say that. Not to mention a 5th grade soul vein, even a 1st grade soul vein is hard to find. But relatively speaking, 10 billion soul stones is indeed a good deal. After all, a 5th grade soul vein can only produce 50 soul veins a year. 10 5th grade soul veins can only produce 500 soul veins. After 10 years, there will only be 5,000. Think about it. How many years will it take to produce 10 billion soul stones? Hui laughed secretly. Then it's a happy decision. Qin Feiyang muttered, looked at Shangguan Fenglan and said with a smile, Okay, I agree. Money and goods. Are you afraid that I'll go back on my word? Shangguan Fenglan raised her eyebrows. I'm not afraid. I'm worried that I'll lose everything. Qin Feiyang said. If you're not afraid that I'll go back on my word, then what is? Shangguan Fenglan rolled her eyes. Qin Feiyang said, You'll hurt our feelings if you say that. Wait. Hui hurriedly stopped Qin Feiyang and said angrily, You can't just say the word feelings. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He was actually jealous? He was really convinced. Don't talk nonsense. Give the soul vein to Lanner first. This soul vein originally belonged to Jiotian Palace. Now Lan not only won't hold you responsible, but also give you 10 billion soul stones as compensation. Where else can you find such a good thing? Hui said angrily. Qin Feiyang was stunned when he heard this and said, Hey, have you forgotten that you snatched the soul vein? Hui's expression stiffened and he said angrily, Wasn't this instigated by you? If I hadn't been muddle-headed, how could I have done such a crazy thing with you? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. Not to mention other things, he was really good at shirking responsibility. Hurry up. Don't ask for too much all day. Lan has already taken the initiative to give you a way out. What else do you want? Hui said impatiently. Do you know what you're doing? You're a typical case of forgetting your friends when you see a girl. Qin Feiyang looked at him with disdain. I'm happy to. Hui shook his head and ran to Shangguan Fenglan's side, and said with a smile, Lan, I've already taught him a lesson. Calm down. When was I angry? Shangguan Fenglan was taken aback and looked at him suspiciously. Hui said. He just said that he would give you the money and the goods. You're not angry? No. Shangguan Fenglan shook her head. Then isn't it my wishful thinking? Hui was stunned. You only know now? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Hui. With a wave of his hand, 10 soul veins suddenly appeared. Each one was more than 100 feet long, like a giant dragon, emitting a hazy gray light. Take it, Qin Feiyang said. Shangguan Fenglan waved her hand, and the 10 soul veins immediately disappeared. She said, Then I'll go back first. When I get the 10 billion soul stones from Great Elder, I'll tell him about your relationship with Lin Yi. Thank you. Qin Feiyang cupped his fist and smiled. Shangguan Fenglan said suspiciously, Speaking of which, what is your relationship with Lin Yi? Qin Feiyang thought for a while and said, Brother and sister. Shangguan Fenglan nodded, then turned around and flew away like lightning. Hui swaggered to Qin Feiyang's side, looked at Shangguan Fenglan's back with infatuation, and said, Did you see how kind Lan is? She's still thinking about you even now. Really? Qin Feiyang whispered. Nonsense. Didn't you hear what she said just now? Get the 10 billion soul stones first, and then tell Great Elder about your relationship with Lin Yi? Why did she do that? She's just worried that when Great Elder learns about your relationship with Lin Yi, he won't give her the 10 billion soul stones. Tell me, where else can I find such an understanding woman? Hui said. It's really hard to find. Qin Feiyang nodded, patted Hui on the shoulder, and said with a meaningful smile, You have to cherish it, or it will be snatched away sooner or later. Let's see who dares. Hui said domineeringly. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. I'm going to the Black Tortoise world. You wait for her here. Wait. These 10 billion soul stones, should we split them? Hui quickly grabbed Qin Feiyang and asked. Qin Feiyang said suspiciously, You're already a half-step immortal realm. What do you need soul stones for? Hui frowned. Half-step immortal realm, don't you need to cultivate? No. I mean, these soul stones should be of no use to you, right? Qin Feiyang said. Don't you know the meaning of many little drops make a mickle? Hui frowned. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, Okay, I can't win against you. Let's split them, okay? That's more like it. Hui smiled. A dignified half-step immortal realm snatching soul stones from me. A beginner divine lord, don't you feel embarrassed? Qin Feiyang's face was full of contempt, and then with a flash, he arrived above the devil's land. That. Cough. Can you come out for a while? I have some questions to ask you. Qin Feiyang looked around. He was calling the little boy, but for a moment, he didn't know how to address him. However, after a long time the little boy didn't appear. Qin Feiyang shouted again, That little kid, can you hear me? Who are you calling? The little boy finally appeared. With his 2 little arms behind his back, he stared at Qin Feiyang like an old man. He was clearly just a little guy, but he still pretended to be very mature. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but want to laugh. I'm calling you. How should I address you? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. The little boy said, Call me Grandpa. Grandpa? Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned, and his face suddenly twitched. The little boy said angrily, "I saved your life. Is it a loss to call me Grandpa?" No. Grandpa, you said that this black tortoise world would slowly grow. I want to know to what extent has this black tortoise world grown? Qin Feiyang said. The little boy said, "It's not much different from before." What the hell? How long has it been? Why is it still the same? Qin Feiyang frowned and said. Chapter 2249. You have to understand that the black tortoise world is not some flower or grass that can grow very tall in 10 days or half a month. This is an independent world. Even an idiot knows that the growth of a world will take a long time. Are you worse than an idiot? The little boy scolded. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. Shouldn't he ask if he didn't understand? Why was he scolding him? Endure. Qin Feiyang asked. Then how long will it take for the black tortoise world to grow? Another stupid question. The growth of a world is never-ending. In other words, it will continue to grow until the day it is destroyed. The little boy said. Never-ending. Qin Feiyang muttered. Of course. The growth of a world can't be separated from other things. For example, living things, plants, essence energy, elemental power, and so on. Especially essence energy. Rich essence energy can accelerate the growth of a world. The little boy said. Qin Feiyang asked curiously. Then how can the essence energy of the black tortoise world become richer? Crystal veins. A large number of crystal veins. The energy contained in crystal veins is essence energy. The little boy said. Crystal veins, Qin Feiyang muttered. The little boy said. If there's a chance you can bring in more crystal veins. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked. Then can the current black tortoise world stop a paragon god? Although it hasn't grown much, it won't be a problem to stop a paragon god. But it's best to avoid it. Because according to the division of human life, the black tortoise world is still in its infancy. The little boy said. Qin Feiyang asked again. What about the Empyrean realm? Are you talking in your sleep? How can the black tortoise world in its infancy withstand a powerhouse at the Empyrean realm? The little boy said angrily. Okay. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly. He had asked a lot of stupid questions today. But he couldn't be blamed. This was because he knew nothing about such an independent world. About an hour later, Shengguan Fenglan finally delivered the Soul Stone. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed and immediately went into seclusion in the castle. Regardless of anything else, he had to break through to the small success Divine Lord realm first. As for Hua Yi, he didn't follow them to the ancient castle. However, he also didn't tell Qin Feiyang where they were going. Qin Feiyang didn't care. This was because Hua Yi only had a friendship with him. Wherever Hua Yi wanted to go, that was his freedom. He couldn't control him. About a year later, Qin Feiyang finally broke through to the small success Divine Lord realm as he wished. The white-eyed wolf's speed was about the same as his. As for the Fire Lotus, he did not see her cultivate much, and she actually broke through to become a small success Divine Lord. The coast. A year passed. The destroyed Heavenly Dragon mountain range had regained much of its vitality. Traces of ferocious beasts could be seen everywhere. Qin Feiyang stood high up in the air, glanced around, and then took out an image crystal. Wang. A shadow appeared. It was Hua Yi. But at this moment, Hua Yi had disguised himself as a burly man and seemed to be drinking in a restaurant. Qin Feiyang said. It seems that you've had a good year. Of course. I'm not like you, only knowing how to cultivate all day. Hua Yi said proudly. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, If I had your cultivation, I would also run over there every day to enjoy myself. Then you have to work hard. Hua Yi chuckled. Qin Feiyang said angrily, Don't be so smug. Let's talk business. Is there any news about the dragons? No. This year has been quite peaceful. Hua Yi shook his head. Peaceful? Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, Have they already given up? Giving up is not the style of the dragons. I think they might be brewing a bigger conspiracy. Hua Yi said. Whether they have a conspiracy or not, we can only summon the courage to accept it. What about Empyrean Palace and the Treasure Pavilion? Qin Feiyang said. Everything has returned to normal. And Empyrean Palace has recruited disciples again. This time, it seems that many terrifying monsters have appeared. Hui said. The northern region is so big. It's normal for a few monsters to appear. Qin Feiyang said. Yes. Hui nodded and said jokingly. Why don't you ask Shengguanqiu how she's been this year? Qin Feiyang was stunned and said, Then how is she? You need me to remind you to ask. It seems that you really have no feelings for her. Since you hurt her a year ago, she has become a workaholic and devoted herself to the Treasure Pavilion. Because of her efforts, the Treasure Pavilion's profit this year is several times that of the previous year. But this year no one has ever seen her smile. It feels like she has become a machine, constantly busy. Hui sighed. Qin Feiyang said, Then it seems that she still doesn't know that this is a show we're putting on. We definitely can't let her know. Hui said. Then we can only let her suffer first. I'm going to East Tomb. Do you want to go? Qin Feiyang said. So soon? Hui was stunned. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. If you don't want to go, I won't force you. I'll go. I'll definitely go. Because I've long wanted to go to East Tomb, West Desert, and South Wasteland to take a look. But this is too sudden. I don't even have time to get together with Lan or... Hui said. Qin Feiyang said speechlessly. Can you not think too highly of yourself? Did she say that she likes you? Even if she doesn't like me, it can't stop me from liking her. Feelings have to be paid. Hui said. Okay. You can take your time with her. I'll go find the Deputy Pavilion Master now. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned off the image crystal, and then looked into the depths of the sea, his eyes flickering. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth lifted, and his big hand grabbed in the air. A huge rock floated out of the sea and landed on the beach with a bang. Immediately after, he raised his arm, and divine power gushed out of his index finger. With a wave of his hand, 3 lines of words appeared on the huge rock. The first sentence was, Dragons are dogs. The second sentence was, East Tomb, Western Desert, Southern Wasteland. The third sentence was Qin Feiyang. This was deliberately provoking the dragons. When the dragons saw these 2 sentences, they would definitely go crazy with anger. At that time, their attention would naturally be on him alone. If you want to kill me, then come with me. Qin Feiyang smiled, and then activated the image crystal to send a message to the Deputy Palace Master. In the southwest of the northern region, there was a large mountain. The mountain stream was lush with vegetation and wild beasts. In one of the valleys, there was a simple little courtyard. In the courtyard, smoke curled up, and one could smell the fragrance of food from afar. Around the courtyard was a vegetable garden. Green wild vegetables, exuding vitality, swayed in the wind. On the left side of the courtyard, there was a small pond. Inside, lotus leaves stood tall and lotus flowers bloomed. From the looks of it, it was as if an ordinary family lived here. Everything appeared ordinary and plain. Chapter 2250. Swish. Suddenly, 3 figures descended in the sky above the valley. The leader was an old man with an old face and gray hair. His clothes were spotless. He held a walking stick in his hand. There was a faint smile on his face and he looked approachable. The other 2 were 2 young men, about 25 or 26 years old. The one on the left was wearing a white robe. He had a slender figure and an outstanding temperament. The young man on the right was wearing a fiery red robe. His long hair was also like flames. Both of them had extraordinary appearances. The aura they exuded was also very strong. The old man chuckled and said, 2 little friends, this is where the Pavilion Master lives. That's right. This old man was the famous Treasure Pavilion Vice Pavilion Master of the Northern Region. As for the 2 young men, naturally they were Qin Feiyang and Hui. Hearing the Vice Pavilion Master's words, Qin Feiyang and Hui lowered their heads in surprise and looked at the valley with smoke rising in spirals. Before, Qin Feiyang sent a message to the Vice Pavilion Master to ask for his help and send him to Dongling. When the vice pavilion master heard this, he agreed to help him without hesitation and asked Qin Feiyang to immediately go to Tianlong City to find him. When Qin Feiyang entered Tianlong City and found the vice pavilion master, Huai also came to find him. Subsequently, the vice pavilion master opened more than a dozen altars and brought them here. At first, they didn't know where the vice pavilion master was taking them. When they heard the previous words, they knew that they were looking for the pavilion master. In other words, the altars that led to Dongling, Western Desert, and Southern Wasteland should be in this valley. Qin Feiyang asked, "Has the pavilion master always lived here?" "Yes." The vice pavilion master nodded. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Then he really is a person who is indifferent to fame and fortune." The vice pavilion master laughed hoarsely. "There's no other way. He's already old. Even if he wants to fight for power and fortune, he's powerless." "That's not entirely true. Look at Feng Yuan, he's also old. But isn't he still fighting for fame and fortune?" Qin Feiyang said. "This is just an exception." The vice pavilion master smiled and led Qin Feiyang to the courtyard. He smiled and said, "Old friend, I'm here for a free meal again. Furthermore, I'm not alone this time. There are 2 other guests." "2 guests?" A suspicious voice came from the backyard. Qin Feiyang and Qin Feng were stunned. It was a woman's voice. Furthermore, it was very pleasant to the ears. Da-da. Following the sound of footsteps, a woman walked out of the courtyard. The woman was about 35 or 36 years old. She wore a long red dress. Her fine black hair was tied up high with an exquisite jade hairpin in the middle. She looked dignified and virtuous. Moreover, he was very kind and did not have any threatening aura at all. Even though there were some wrinkles by the corner of her eyes, her figure and skin were reminiscent of a young lady's. Juniors Qin Feiyang and Huai greet the pavilion master. Qin Feiyang and the other man hurriedly bowed. "You are Qin Feiyang and Huai." The woman looked at the 2 of them curiously. Huai said in surprise, "Pavilion master, you know us? You killed Feng Yuan and Feng Zihan of the 9th Heaven Palace. You broke into the Divine Land and killed the guardian of the entrance. You also defeated the clone of Longzuan and forced the ancestral dragon of the Fire Dragon clan to flee. Most importantly, you even injured my disciple. With so many great achievements, it's hard for me not to know," the woman said. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, "I admit to everything else, but I can't admit to hurting Shangguan Qiu. Don't be nervous. This old guy has already told me why you did this. You were right. It's just that poor girl Qiu fell in love with someone she shouldn't have." The woman sighed. "Ahem. Can you not call me an old guy in front of outsiders?" The vice pavilion master coughed. The woman rolled her eyes at him, and then looked at Qin Feiyang and Huai. She smiled and said, "You came at the right time. Let's have a meal together." Well, Qin Feiyang and Huai looked at each other and hesitated. "Okay, I won't force you. Tell me, what do you want from me?" The woman walked to a stone table and sat on a stone bench. Then she pointed at a few stone benches next to her and gestured for Qin Feiyang and Huai to sit down. Qin Feiyang and Huai walked over. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, "We want to go to Dongling, Western Desert, and Southern Wilderness." "Why are you going to those 3 places?" The woman was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. "First, we're looking for someone. Second, we're afraid that the dragons will come for revenge and implicate innocent people, so we want to lure them away." Qin Feiyang said truthfully, "You're doing this for the good of the northern region, but what about Dongling, Western Desert, and Southern Wilderness? If you lure the dragons there, won't innocent people be implicated? In other words, you're diverting the trouble," the woman said. "Their target is me. As long as the people of the Eastern Tomb, the Western Desert, and the Southern Wasteland follow their orders, no one will be implicated." Qin Feiyang frowned. The woman said, "If Dongling, Western Desert, and Southern Wilderness are also wanted, then you'll really be the enemy of the world." "It's okay. I've already made up my mind," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "What about you?" The woman looked at Huai. "What can we do? We've already boarded his pirate ship. It's hard to get off." Huai looked helpless. The woman chuckled and said, I can help you, but you must promise me that you won't implicate the treasure pavilion. Not only the treasure pavilion of the northern region, but also the treasure pavilion of the western desert, southern wilderness and Dongling. Don't worry, Qin Feiyang said. Okay. The woman nodded and asked, where do you plan to go first? Dongling, Qin Feiyang said. Hearing this, the woman turned to look at the deputy pavilion master and said, you also go to Dongling and explain the situation to old Pang. Okay. The deputy pavilion master nodded and looked at Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi with a smile. Come with me. After that, he turned and left the courtyard, walking toward the pond. Thank you, pavilion master. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at each other, cupped their fists at the woman, and chased after the deputy pavilion master. I hope the treasure pavilion won't be implicated. The woman looked at their backs and muttered to herself. She also got up and disappeared into the backyard. Qin Feiyang caught up with the deputy pavilion master and asked suspiciously, Senior, who is the old Pang that the pavilion master mentioned just now? Old Pang is the chief pavilion master of Dongling. However, this person is not as easy to get along with as our pavilion master. He has a bad temper. In the future, don't provoke him in Dongling. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. The deputy pavilion master warned. Understood. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi nodded. While talking, the two followed the deputy pavilion master and stopped by the pond. Where's the altar? Qin Feiyang looked around suspiciously. It's far away, but right in front of you. The deputy pavilion master pointed to the pond. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at the pond in front of them, their eyes full of surprise. The deputy pavilion master waved his hand, and the ground suddenly trembled. Then they saw the pond split into two and slowly move to both sides. The most important thing was, the water in the pond was actually still. In other words, although the pond had split, although the bottom was empty, not a single drop of water was missing. Soon, directly below the pond, a secret room of about a few hundred feet appeared in front of the two. In the center of the secret room, there was a huge altar. The deputy pavilion master jumped down and landed beside the altar. Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi quickly followed. After entering the secret room, the deputy pavilion master waved his hand again, and the pond that had split into two slowly closed. The motionless water in the pond also began to ripple with waves. The deputy pavilion master stood beside the altar and said to Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi, this altar is a little different from the teleportation altar that we usually use. How is it different? Qin Feiyang was curious. This altar needs to be at least at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm to be activated. The deputy pavilion master said with a smile. As he spoke, waves of divine power rolled out and entered the altar. Wang. The altar suddenly emitted a hazy blood-red light. Only at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm can it be activated? Qin Feiyang was shocked and asked, is the altar in the Nine Heavens palace the same? Of course. If everyone can be activated, the Nine Heavens palace won't publicly place such an important altar on the square above the stairway to heaven. The deputy pavilion master said. Qin Feiyang nodded. It seemed that in the future, he had to continue to maintain a friendly relationship with the treasure pavilion. Otherwise, even if the treasure pavilion allowed him to use the altar, he wouldn't be able to activate it. Boom. After a dozen breaths, accompanied by a deafening rumble, the altar finally activated and bloomed with dazzling light. Let's go. The deputy pavilion master smiled and stepped onto the altar. Northern region, we'll meet again if fate allows. Qin Feiyang muttered as he also jumped onto the altar with one step. Sigh. I'm really asking for trouble. Hua Yi shook his head and sighed, and also walked onto the altar. Immediately, the figures of the three quickly faded. In less than 3 breaths, the three completely disappeared, and the light of the altar also dimmed. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.